Like you always,
If it's not, if it weren't to work, so what you want to do.
Would everybody please settle down and get seated? We're going to get underway here in just a second. So I've been asked a couple times about public comment. The posture of the committee at this point is we have a hard cutoff at 4 o'clock. If we have the opportunity to allow some public comment, we will. We'll ask that we keep it short, but we do have to honor the 4 o'clock cutoff. There's a sign up sheet right up here on the front. So we'll give anybody a minute or two. And as we finish kind of getting prepped to get the committee underway. So thank you. So I'm going to start off by welcoming everybody. We've got a kind of fun. I haven't got to see some of your faces since we signed died earlier in the year. And so it's always fun to get back up and moving again. For those of you who are attending online, the State and Local Government Subcommittee, which is Subcommittee of Governmental Affairs. We're here to hear HB 812. And but before we get moving, we're going to start off by opening with a word of prayer for the committee chairman, Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If everybody will bow with me, please. Dear kind and heavenly Father, God, we thank you, Lord, for the blessing, God, to live in this state. God, we ask you, Lord, that you continue to rain your blessings down on Georgia. We ask, God, for your guidance, your wisdom. We ask, God, that you look over all the leaders in this state, be they at the state level, the federal, the county, the city, whatever capacity they serve, God, that they'll seek your will, your discernment, and that we'll forever follow you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right. With that, we have one bill on the agenda today. That's HB 812. I believe Representative Chokas, you're here to present. So I will. Do you want the table or do you want the podium? Table. All right. Well, I'll turn the table mic on and it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and other chairmen. I appreciate this opportunity to present the bill. If I may, I'd like to invite Austin Hackney, the Executive Vice President of the Georgia Home Builders Association, to come join me at the table if that meets with your approval, sir.
By all means.
Thank you. All right. Super. Well, cool. I hope some people brought some turkey so we could go ahead and have Thanksgiving. There's a large crowd today. I didn't realize we'd have this many people. But thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 812, and it's LC 590157 is the bill. And as you can see from the bill, we're trying to assist the Department of Community Affairs in looking at and more stringently making sure that our local governments abide by the laws that they have locally set into motion. And we also want to give the home builders an opportunity to be able to do their job as far as the permitting process is concerned and put some guardrails on the process. Currently, I've heard horror stories of the length of time it takes for contractors to get a building permit. And those delays, for many varied reasons, most times not even dealing with safety or structural reasons, end up costing large sums of money and adds to the soft cost of housing. And I'm hoping that this measure will, in its position, be able to bring down the cost of housing. And the numbers that I've heard is anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. The delays have been unprecedented in many places in the state. It's not all everywhere, but it's in some places. The local governments are required to provide the permits within a 45-day period. And unfortunately, these delays are not being addressed. They're redlining things that needed to be done to the plans and specs, which is understandable, dealing with the local codes and ordinances. But then once they submit those plans and specs, after they've been corrected, they come back and they take another bite of the apple and causes more delays. Now, from personal experience, in most cases, you're dealing with contractors, you're dealing with professionals in the planning and specs. You've got civil engineers that have P, you have architects. These are highly trained, skilled individuals, and so they're not submitting stuff on the back of a paper napkin and asking the local building official to approve it. These are meet the standards that are necessary, and then the local officials need to come in, and they come in and address those issues and mark them up. And then when we have the builders come back with the corrected copies, meeting all the requirements that were requested of them by the local authorities, they come back and do it again. And I've had personal experience with that. When I was building my house, I invited the building inspector to come to the house and kind of go through and let me know what needed to be addressed, what needed to be corrected, what needed to be changed. And he came 2 weeks before the official inspection to do all that. And that would give me plenty of time to get with my contractor to have everything done that was supposed to be done. Well, we did everything. And then the day of the inspection, he came back and started writing up more stuff. And I said, wait a minute, the contractor's left. These are now change orders. I'm going to have to bring them back in. And so it ended up costing me thousands of dollars in additional unnecessary expenses if he had just done what he was supposed to do and tell us exactly what we needed to address. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to bring some order and some organization to the process so that we can go on about our business. And I would like to go ahead and let Austin Hackney take the floor and address some of the issues. Probably before I do that, I do want to say this is one of the many things that we can do to address affordable housing. It's become an issue. And in my part of the country, it's not so bad an issue. But as I was driving to Atlanta this morning and I see residential areas, subdivisions where developers are coming in and it's $400,000, $500,000, and $600,000 on the marquee outside, and you have a young family, two professionals just got married and they're trying to raise a family and buy a house. Many times that's just completely out of reach. And this, in some small way, will bring down the cost of housing. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to address some other issues to also help with that. So at this time, Austin, I'm going to let you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman of the committee and committee members. My name is Austin Hackney here on behalf of the Home Builders Association of Georgia. I do have a handout that I'd like to get to the committee members if I could. And you're going to hear from some speakers today about the effects of these processes and mandates on the home sales price. Thank you. But what I want to talk to you today is about the text of the bill. And I'd like to just walk you through line by line the two existing government processes that are addressed in this bill and tell you why we would appreciate your help on addressing some of these inefficiencies. But we've got two goals with House Bill 812, and the first goal is housing affordability. And as Chairman Chook has said, there are many components that go into the sales price of the house outside of just what market forces are. But the laws that dictate how the house is built and the timeline that it takes to do that are a component of the price of the house. And so anything that we can do, that you can do as a legislative body to make that environment as helpful as possible to affordability, and that's what we want to address in this bill. And the second thing is that if the state is going to mandate a government process that our citizens have to comply with, we want that process to be efficient and fair and transparent in how it works. And so those are the two goals of House Bill 812. And I want to walk you through how we propose to accomplish that. And you'll see right off the bat that most of the language in these couple of pages is existing statute in the code today. And so in part one, this process for a local amendment to the statewide construction codes exists today. That local control exists today. And if this bill passed, it would remain to exist in this process. But the idea is that the state of Georgia, through the Department of Community Affairs and the State Codes Advisory Committee, that's a statutory committee that you guys have figured out, are industry stakeholders, mostly building officials representing the cities and counties, but also contractors, architects, and engineers, are volunteers that go to the Department of Community Affairs and they review the codes and they offer Georgia-specific amendments to make sure those international codes work for us in the state. And those code books include geographic districts of the state of Georgia. There are different requirements for different areas of the state that are recognized in these statewide codes. And so what type of storm preparedness requirements exist on the coast might not exist elsewhere. The code books recognize those local differences already. But when the legislature adopted these statewide requirements, they also left some space for local governments to adopt more stringent amendments where the climatic, geologic, topographic, or public safety factors require those unique local amendments. And so these mandatory construction codes, of which there are 9 code books that a contractor has to comply with when they build a new house, these are statewide mandates, and they really explain from start to finish how the house has to be built so it's safe and it's got building integrity and it lasts for generations. So that process exists today. If a local government has a local unique condition that they think requires an amendment to the statewide mandatory building codes, then there's a process for them today to go to Department of Community Affairs, to adopt that position locally, to explain why those unique conditions require that more stringent mandate, and to get some commentary from DCA that says yes, no, or no comment on the adoption of that local amendment. Now, the statute today allows that local government to then adopt their proposed amendment no matter what the department says about it. But over their objections, they can adopt this amendment. The objections might be that that local amendment is too costly for home buyers, that it doesn't make technical sense. It could be any objection that you might have to it. But in our experience around the state, that whole process is usually ignored. There's no teeth to it. If the department says, don't adopt that amendment, the locals can do it anyway. So what we see out in the field is that there's no need to use this process because in the moment, as Chairman Chokus said, if an inspector wants to enforce a more stringent requirement on the contractor, on the homeowner, there's not really a whole lot of leverage that that individual has to argue against that more stringent requirement. So the bill that you see in front of you, starting really on line 31, amends the existing statute to give that approval or disapproval process some teeth. The local government wants to adopt a more stringent mandate in the construction codes. They can continue to do that. But our goal would be for that group of stakeholders, the State Codes Advisory Committee, to review that local amendment and make a binding determination about its need and whether it should be adopted locally. So that's part one. Part two has to do with the delays in land development permit applications. And so this is about greenfield development when a developer wants to turn a piece of raw land into a new subdivision, new housing for families, then they're going to apply for a land disturbance permit. And that process exists in statute today, starting on line 78. And so the statute today requires that plan review of these engineered stamp plans to happen within a 45-day period. But in our experience around the state, even when a local government says that they're going to do it within 45 days, within 30 days, whatever their published turnaround time is, that can be extended nearly indefinitely because every time there's a comments made on the plans, the comments are addressed, the shot clock restarts. And so we see, because there's no requirement today to get all those comments in a single round of comments, they can be added to throughout the process. If an applicant thinks they've addressed what the comments were, they might return that application with those comments addressed, and then find out that there are more comments coming their way for the applicant and their engineer to figure out and respond to. And so what says 45 days in statute today can be a year or 2 years or 3 years of this land development permit application process. And so when an applicant is asking for a land development permit, they're past the zoning review. The community has already said publicly that this project fits their zoning requirements and should move forward. And now we're just in an inefficient government process of plan review and comments. And so our proposal to add some efficiency back to what we think was the original intent of the existing statute is to say that these comments have to come in a single round. The applicant gets their engineered stamp plans to the local issuing authority. They take 45 days to ensure that the erosion and sediment control plans are right, the stormwater management plans are right, the zoning conditions that were previously agreed to are reflected in the plans. All the land use and utility approvals, transportation approvals, all those comments happen in a single round of red line comments back to the applicant. They have a period of time to address. The reviewers have a period of time to ensure that those comments were addressed. And all of the comments that are being issued as a part of this application are going to need to cite the code or statute or even engineering best practice that is alleged to have been violated and led to the red line comment. And so just like we do in the building inspections, post-building permit, vertical construction, you might get a plumbing inspection as a part of that process. Well, the inspector's got to cite the section of the plumbing code that you violated that led to the stop work order or the citation. That requirement doesn't exist in the development permitting. And we think adding that would add some transparency to the process. If an applicant, a developer is going through this very expensive process with the engineering firms and everything else, then they need to understand the rules of the game going into it so that they can comply with their initial application. And so that's my explanation of the text in front of you. Be happy to answer any questions about why we think this is important or what the actual results of these proposed changes would be. But as you can see behind me, there are lots of business owners in the room who want to talk about their experience with these issues and about how the proposed change could help.
All right, I see one question. He's 20, Chairman Henderson, right next to me here.
Chairman, Chairman Chokus or Austin, either one of y'all, have we had any discussion with DCA related to what specifically in section 1? Is this expanding the scope of what they do, or is it just basically giving them more authority that or maybe not more, but clarifying the authority that they already have?
So my short answer would be that this responsibility already exists in statute, as you can see in the code. Our conversations with DCA, was negative to new responsibilities for the department without, a accompanying appropriation. But my comments about the State Codes Advisory Committee, may need to be more explicit in the bill, because that's a group of volunteer citizens that will volunteer their time already to go to the department and make comments on statewide construction codes. And they don't even get a per diem. So that's no cost at all to the state.
Okay, follow up, Mr. Chairman. And that kind of leads into my second part of that question, and that is, do we or does DCA consider any clarification or additional responsibilities laid out in this proposed bill as requiring additional appropriations?
I'd prefer to let them answer that question. I don't know how they would structure the situation, but this group already exists. The process already exists. The code experts are already on staff at DCA. And to their description, they get very few of these local amendments sent to their office. So no, I don't know if this process became much more clear and statutory, that they would get an influx of local amendments to the process, because let me say again, this bill does not take away any local control or opportunity to amend the statewide code. So that would still exist. As far as more responsibility for the department, I'd probably let them answer that.
Okay, Chairman Chokus, is that something you'd be willing to clarify with the department, to get with DCA, just to clarify that for when we bring this to full committee?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Montaham.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Chokus, my friend, I had a great time down there in Americus for the Blue Ribbon Study Committee. And thank you for your hospitality. What was the name of that hotel?
The Windsor Hotel.
I had a great meal there. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I stayed in I'm trying to remember from Driving Miss Daisy. What was the name of the room? What was her name? I forget. Anyway, I stayed in her suite in Americus, Georgia. And that was true Southern hospitality. I appreciate that. I'll give these questions to Mr. Hackney, if that's okay.
Yes.
So I'm working through the bill, just trying to get a better understanding of this. Obviously, in Paulding County, Georgia, my constituents are very interested in the issue of housing. We have about an 89% residential tax base in Paulding County, which can be sometimes a little bit inundating tax-wise when you think of it from a tax liability standpoint, and certainly from a tax mixture standpoint. So you had mentioned, I think I'm just going to kind of go through some of your comments on the State Codes Advisory Council. What is the makeup of that advisory council? Is there any city or county representation, GMA, ACCG, or these folks a part of that conversation? Are they members on the board?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a statutory body. You guys prescribe exactly who's nominated and appointed to this committee. I believe there are either 19 or 21 members, and it's, how many building officials are appointed. And so those would represent the cities and counties as employees of the local governments. And there's a requirement for contractors, engineers, fire code officials, public health department. It's all prescribed in the statute, and the biggest voting block on that committee belongs to the cities and counties through the building officials.
So as a follow-up though, are there any policymakers? I understand employees that may be there. So what policymakers, folks who are having to deal with the constituent feedback, right? So in almost every community, and I don't think Paulding County is alone in this, I don't believe, but in almost every county, a zoning or development meeting is some of the most heated conversations that can happen at the local level. For those folks, I didn't serve in local government, but those that did, I know there's several representatives here that did know that those can be heated, and or they can spill out into literal physical fights. I mean, that's how. So I would want to make sure that if you're going to have, this new committee that's really looking at all these building codes, right, very stringently, that you'd want policymakers. Do you agree with that?
I do, and I think you'd see the policymakers get involved because the State Codes Advisory Committee is going to be doing this technical work. They're going to be looking through the code books and offering amendments on the technical aspects of those instructions. They then make a recommendation to the DCA board on whether it should adopt or not these administrative rules. And so the DCA board is, I think, where you'd see some of those policymakers. There are mayors and county commissioners that serve on the DCA board that I think would be bringing some of those concerns to that decision making.
So then you would be amenable to an amendment to the bill that would then change the makeup of that board, where we would appoint then specific seats for commissioners and mayors.
I think what you're going to see is that the designees of those political appointments would then reach to the actual technical practitioners that work for them for feedback. So my complaint here today has nothing to do with the makeup of that committee. I think the technical experts that need to review those codes, this body has already recognized who should be looking at that, and then how that process works for the actual policymakers to adopt or not based on what the citizens of Georgia want.
But you wouldn't be opposed to having those county commissioners or mayors, and if they decide they want to have a designee, you would be happy to have their voices on that board?
I would. I don't know that it's really connected to this bill as much, but it seems like two separate issues, but
it sounds like you don't have an issue with that. Those are separate issue. I'm just trying to contemplate this in its entirety.
I think what you guys deliberated and decided as a legislative body for that statutory council makes a lot of sense. I'm not proposing any change to that makeup.
I see. So you would not be for that change to
No,
make sure that you
I don't.
have some statutory requirements of having local government folks on the board?
Tell you what, when we take this, we got two more questions and we got a hard stop at 4, but
Okay.
I'd be happy for y'all to take it off.
I have some additional questions, Mr. Chairman.
Can we take it to the end and let, go ahead and continue testimony?
It's your
Thanks.
committee, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Okay, may I respond? On line 101, where it says zoning, we're not dealing with the zoning in this bill. Explain, if you would, Austin, would you explain the context of zoning in line 101?
And starting on line 99, that section starting with a lowercase d, this just says that all of the reviews that are a part of this plan review for an LDP would include the zoning, and that's basically what they do to check that the zoning conditions that were already agreed upon are reflected in the plans that have been submitted. So that's really the only reason you see the word zoning in this bill. It doesn't have anything to do with local zoning conditions or what might be agreed to by the developer and the city council or county commission.
Representative Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I also would like to have an opportunity to have maybe the DCA people here so we could ask them questions. I know agencies don't like to publicly oppose legislation, but this is important. Do you think if this bill were passed that it would impact the decision that's been made by the Gordon County Superior Court on the tiny homes case?
I'm familiar with the case that you're speaking about, and this bill doesn't affect the zoning procedures law.
I'm having trouble figuring out how it doesn't affect the zoning. That's where why I'm asking the question, because
So, the zoning conditions that case addressed are conditions that a developer and the planning commission would discuss before this land disturbance permit is ever applied for.
if a county had a minimum of 3-acre lot to have a building permit, would this bill impact that decision?
No, because the county's they adopt that ordinance outside of the building codes that are addressed in part 1 and part 2 about the timeline for the LDP permit wouldn't really affect that either.
Flexibility on permitting and giving more local jurisdictions more authority and more freedom is kind of my goal. So I might need to do some of my own research to figure out exactly if I 100% believe you about the zoning versus permitting issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Okay, finally, we have Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for bringing this bill, and thank you for presenting some of the information. Just a quick question. I know you talk a lot about housing, and I definitely agree we need to do a lot around housing. This doesn't just apply to housing, right? It applies to building of any building, whether that's a school, office, or factory, anything like that, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Great. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I had a couple questions of my own, but I'm going to pass for the moment. Okay, we're going to move along here in the agenda. Thank you. First, I have Dr. Jerry Parrish on the agenda. Dr. Parrish, if you please, we're trying to keep these to about 5 or 10 minutes max. I'm definitely trying to honor this 4 o'clock hard stop, which isn't always easy to do. So,
That's correct.
thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to provide. I'm just here for information. Just so you know who I am, I'm the chief economist of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. And you may know that the Metro Atlanta Chamber is the only chamber in the country, regional or statewide, who has a full-time chief economist. So my job, and they brought me up here to make sure the numbers are correct. So I'm going to show you some numbers. And I want to talk about supply and demand. You guys should have all learned that in economics class long ago. That certainly affects the housing prices. And as far as demand, we've really got it here in Georgia. I brought some slides for you to see, and I'll leave a copy where you can see them. A lot of fine numbers detail in here. But what you got to know is, the state of Georgia is growing, and certainly the metro area is growing as well. This is a slide of the population growth 2010 to 2024. Each county has its name, the percentage growth, the number of people, it grew by, and the percentage growth down in there. And it's a heat map. So the counties that grew the fastest on a percentage basis are actually in the darkest green. This represents the 29 counties of the Metropolitan Statistical Area. We call it the MSA. That is a designation set out by the U.S. Census Bureau of this is the market area, loosely of what they call it. Only one of the counties, and that's Meriwether County, actually lost population during that time. However, there's a substantial number of rural counties in Georgia and every other state in the country that have lost population during this time. So we've got demand coming in. What's the forecast look like? I picked up the ARC, Atlanta Regional Commission's forecast. They only do the 17 counties that you see here. And you can see they're expecting another 1.8 million plus people in just these 17 counties by 2050. And so housing is going to be an issue. Trust me, it already is an issue. I gave a presentation this morning. Most of my job is to go out and give speeches, and spoke to the Fayette Chamber this morning down in Peachtree City. The number one thing they had questions about is attainable workforce housing. How do we do it? That's the issue on everybody's mind. And it's certainly not just in Atlanta, and it's not just in Georgia. So one of the things I wanted to show you is kind of the supply response. How are we doing building permit wise? And so I've made a little chart of, You see the two colors here. I've got it in black and red for you Georgia fans. I'm an Auburn guy, so we're having a tough year this year. Anyway, the black is the state of Georgia, and the red is the Atlanta building permits. And you can see we saw a peak a couple of years ago. We're actually down from that. And the reason people ask me what's the reason? Interest rates went up, building material costs went up, labor is super scarce, hard to get. And so that's the reason the numbers have gone down. Now you got to be a little careful with these numbers. This is, every one unit is a structure. So it could be an eightplex apartment building. It could be a bigger one than that. But these are the really good solid numbers that we can get. So think of it on a relative basis. You're going up, you're going down. Are you higher than you were before? I will tell you, nobody in the country is as high as they were before the, 06, 07, before the crash in 08. Back then we had regularly more than 70,000 in just the Atlanta MSA per year. And now the state of Georgia peaked out at that a couple of years ago. So certainly a lot less building than there was out there. Now, I wanted to come up with a metric to show you tightness of the market. And this is not a very good measure, but there's not much out there that's really good. So really what I wanted to show you was what's the population growth compared to the number of housing permits issued. And so you can't really tell a lot about that. You don't know if these are single people that need a place to live by themselves, a family of 12, the structures I've already mentioned. However, it does give you an idea where housing is going to be the tightest here, and the darkest areas are where the tightest are. And this multiple, exactly this. It takes the average number of people per year over this period, 2010 to 2024, divided by the building permits that were issued. So it is a measure. It's not the perfect measure, but then, there's really not a perfect measure. One of the things I did, I moved up here a couple of years ago from Florida, and one of the things I noticed was the lack of data availability. We deal with a lot of folks. We're the economic development agency. We help all 29 counties in the metro area. We also help the state in recruiting companies here from all over the country and all over the world doing economic development. And one of the things you see, especially when you get into smaller counties and the smaller economic developers, they don't really have good data availability, and they don't have a person on staff that really knows where to find it. So a lot of them used to ask me. And so what I decided to do was produce a website that have consistent data for all 29 counties. The data I showed you, the building permits, the population numbers, all came from this thing. I'm going to show you that in just a second. One measure you have to think about is housing cost burdened. And this is something the American Community Survey does. And what they'll do is they'll take how many people are paying 30% or more of their rent, or 50% more of their rent, of their income in rent. And these are the numbers now, the current latest data we have for people that are paying 50% more of their income in rent. And the reason you're going to ask, why don't we use homeowners? Well, it's because there's at least 2 or 3 of you here who bought their house before COVID, before prices went up. You refinanced at 2.75%, and you've got a crazy low house payment. It no longer becomes a comparable compared to these renters who actually have to get in the market every year and pay. So that number, the housing number, the permit number are all on this website I just built. It's called Macro View. It's on the Metro Atlanta Chamber website. It's got a little tab up there for the entire metro area as one. It's got a tab for the state of Georgia. You see down the left side, every single county. There's a little, if you forget the name of your county, if you recognize the shape, it's right there beside it. You can click on that and get all this same info. I'll just click through really quickly what Fulton County looks like since we're standing here in Fulton County. There's the population growth. It goes way back in the number of years. Every single year you can see it. Here's the number of housing permits, and you can see we're not as high as we were before the 08, 09 recession back there. Housing cost burden. There's one that says 30%, which is kind of the normal one. but 50%, here's, almost 1 in 4 renters in Georgia are housing cost burden at the tune of 50% here. So, that data is available. I'm always available for questions and producing data. I know a lot of you guys probably live outside the metro area. All you have to do is contact me through Sky, through any of our policy team. Call me up. You can call any chamber in the country and ask for the economist, and they'll say, hey, the Atlanta Metro Chamber is the only one that has one. Call them. So I'll be glad to produce that kind of data for you, but I just wanted to make it easy for the economic developers, nonprofits, county commissioners, everybody to see this data and actually have something to compare themselves against the county, the metro region, and the state of Georgia. But that's all the slides I have. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them if I can. Thank you.
Questions? I actually have a couple questions for you. Rare I get an economist in here I can chat with. So I'm going to give you a case in point. In 2020, I bought a house for my mom, and that house was $240 something thousand. It's a nice entry level house. Turn around a couple years later, and that same house was valued at $430,000. How did I accrue $200,000 of wealth in a matter of 3 years on a property that really wasn't substantially changed?
That's a great question. It's happened all over the country. There was a tremendous amount of demand and not an expansion in supply to take up all that demand. When people got out there in the market, and this has been a big issue. We do economic development. A couple of things you have to think about. A lot of people are trapped in their house because they got such a low mortgage and they're in it. Let's say that was your personal house and you wanted to move and change jobs. Well, now instead of having a low interest rate mortgage, you've got to pay 40% more or 60% more for a house. And now you've got to sign what would have been, over the last year or so, a 7% note. That's really affected the labor market. The house hasn't changed, but the market absolutely has. And it's been demand driven, and people, I always said this when people said, oh, these young people, they just want to rent the rest of their lives and all that stuff. I said, that's crap. I said, when they have kids, if they grew up with a yard, they're going to buy a house with a yard, and there's been a lot of that demographics and a lot of that demand and a lot of people wanting to move to the South. Hey, let's enjoy that because not every state, a lot of them are depopulating now up north, but it's just the market's changed. And now, to get in, that's what makes it so difficult. And I would like to make one real point here. I've studied this as an economist. I taught grad school. I taught at Florida State for about 12 years, and I made my students do a lot of this work, to be honest with you. So I didn't have to do it. But the big economic impact here of not having a house, not having an attainable house for somebody to move into is not just the money you lose. Because when people move houses, they buy paint and they buy furniture and all that, economic activity. It's that probability of filling that job, that this company in Georgia needs somebody. And it's the double economic activity, the house purchase, and then it's that filling that job to where that company stays here and makes money and, takes care of their employees, all that stuff. So really a lot more economic impact than you would think in general with just a house.
So I'm going to get back. Sorry, there was a lot there. I'll
That's
have to
okay.
digest all that overnight. But getting back to it was a hyperinflation period of 2 years. I mean,
Right.
this isn't a 3%, 5%, what the market's seen year over year traditionally for the last 40, 50 years. And it seems
Absolutely.
like there's something maybe I was wrong and there was just a bunch of pent up demand that nobody knew about. And maybe I'm drawing the wrong conclusion of what you're saying, but are you saying we just had a bunch of pent up demand and it all hit right after COVID, or?
No, I mean, you're right. There was inflation. We all know about the 7, 8, and 9%. I mean, we're continuously trying to tamp that down. The Federal Reserve is torn now. The labor market is slowing down. They're trying to kill inflation while they can. It's a very difficult path to walk if you're a Federal Reserve, Board of Governors right now. But yeah, the inflation, and it not just inflation in general for housing and food and all that stuff. Think about, the reason people aren't building as many new houses. I mean, think about, we used to buy lumber at, $300 a thousand. And it went up to what, $1,200, I think I saw. It quadrupled during that time. And then on top of that, we've got tariffs that are keeping some of these building materials higher. And when it costs that much more to buy, to build a new house, that draws up the houses that are consistently on the market. It brings them up in value as well.
We're getting a little off topic now, but I have
Yeah.
this other committee. It's called a Special Committee on Resource Management. And,
Okay.
and I chair that one.
Okay.
And I would like to have you come talk to us a little bit because I have more questions for you.
Hey,
In the meantime, let's see. We're going to go to 25, Representative Montam.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your, it doesn't bother me. Just don't call me late for supper. I have a question for you. Thank you for your presentation. That was great. So I want to talk to you about one, just house pricing in general. So what is, I know you've kind of been studying out of this. What is the average cost of just the construction in and of itself? What are the, the wood, the nails, the labor to build the house? Square foot? Do we know?
I'm no expert. I've dealt with home builders. They talk to me a lot, not about just construction costs, the labor, the permitting fees, impact fees, those kind of things can be substantial. And they vary from region to region. But I don't have the expertise to answer that question. There's a lot of people know a lot more about than me.
Okay.
That's all right.
That's okay. Thank you. So I want to ask your opinion. I know, look, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm just going to ask some simple questions. I'm looking at some code requirements here. They require counties to, this is line 16 through 25, requiring counties to justify the climatic, geological, topographic, or public safety evidence, which I would imagine could mean generating some engineering reports, geotechnical documentation, environmental reviews, obviously legal opinions from their lawyers. Do you think that, and we can go on, right, as we go through line 31 through 42, I think there's quite a few in there, but what happens to those costs? Do those get passed on in permitting to the homeowner?
I would suspect so. Once again, I'm no expert in the housing market, but certainly the home builders are out there to build product and make a profit. And certainly, I would suspect that a lot of that gets passed on into the price of the home.
So you don't think, I know I was looking at D.R. Horton, I think they made about 17% last year. They're not going to go down on that margin if they can. They're going to pass that along to the consumer, whatever the market will bear. I mean, I think that's everybody. I don't know anybody who, tries to sell for less than, their cost of production. Maybe like Uber and Tesla, but, they're trying to get up there. They got some investors. Yeah. Maybe that'll help float that boat. I don't know that that's a good business practice. So you feel like those costs will be passed to the consumer and I think often we hear the folks who are wanting to buy these entry level homes are firefighters and police officers and kind of folks who had just graduated graduated college, right? I think is that so?
I'm not 100% sure what the question was there. I think you said something. I'm assuming that, the housing, all those costs get passed on to the homeowner.
Yeah.
It's my guess. Yes. As much as possible. Companies aren't doing it for their health. They're doing it to keep in business and make a profit and continue.
Well, I want to ask you, this is just an observation. Just want to ask you. I mean, again, I'm not learned in this. I have no idea. I'm just what I see is what I know. But have you ever seen a residential developer maybe reserve capacity in a suburban neighborhood just for, like 30%? We're going to save that for law enforcement, firefighters, and newly graduated
No, I don't deal enough with them to know that if they're doing that or not, to be honest.
I hadn't seen that,
Yeah.
but I hear that a lot, and I just didn't know if you had heard that
Yeah.
as well. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Who's next? Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate you talking about supply and demand because I think it is a really important part of why we're seeing a lot of the issues around the skyrocketing prices in housing. And, you know, considering the supply and demand you were talking about, it's a very big demand market. And I think a part of that that isn't talked about as much is the increased demand we're seeing, not from families or regular people buying a home, but investment firms, huge corporations buying up housing. And obviously, you know, we've been seeing some statistics in the last year that Georgia has one of the highest percentages of housing that is owned by these kind of corporate. And so I'm curious if you think that that's also another housing supply is obviously a huge part of what we need to do to help stabilize, but also on the demand side of things, lowering that demand from people who aren't, you know, regular working families trying to get a house, but instead these huge corporations, lowering that demand so that we can immediately in the short term release a bunch of housing stock that already currently exists and therefore helping stabilize the market. Do you think that's something that we should be working on?
I'm not a policy person, so I'm gonna have to defer to our policy team. That's not something I'm really qualified to answer.
Well, as an economist, I was just wondering if you think that would help.
Well, well, let's talk about supply and demand. If there's more demand, it's gonna typically raise the price. Certainly if there's less supply, that typically raises the price. But like I said, I'm not a policy guy here, so just the economist.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative, what was it? Lumpson. Or
Just had a question concerning, we created some new cities over the past several cycles. And in the creation of those cities, did you take, but I mean, that has to do with density really, when you come down to it. Did your chart take into consideration the creation of those cities and how that might have affected the density?
No, all it says is there's this many more people in 2024 than there is in 2010, on the population side. And the permits are county-wide. They should include all the cities within that county. That's the way I understand that data. That data comes from Census Bureau. It's reported by the Federal Reserve. And that's where I got that data.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you for the knowledge you gave us today. That was very insightful.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the list, Jay Knight, the chair for the Georgia Residential Land Development Council. And Mr. Knight, you have about 5 to 10 minutes to speak and about 30 minutes of questions coming. So.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you all on behalf of us in the industry for making this a priority. Representative Oliver, I spoke in front of your caucus recently, and you introduced me, and you said that housing was the most important thing, and we agree. That affordable housing is the most important thing. We believe that all the answers in housing are found in supply. I talked to an analyst, Eugene James. Some of you may be familiar. I was confirming some numbers with him, and it actually was much more dire than I thought. He said we had not produced 5,000 lots in the last 12 months, building lots, although we had sold 20,000 houses. He said the Georgia market, and we've known this for a while, or the North Georgia market is 35 to 36,000 building lots a year is what we need. We don't think we'll deliver 10,000 in the next 12 months. So we ran a 15,000 house deficit last year in 24. We'll run a 25,000 house deficit in the next 12 months. And scarcity drives up cost, drives up prices to the Georgia home buyer. Right now, it's estimated that 70% of would-be Georgia home buyers cannot afford a home. And this is an effort. There's certainly more heavy lifting to do, but we think this will help. Representative Montahan, you were talking about pricing. Could we reserve 30% of our houses so that we could sell to first responders? We would love to have 100% affordability for first responders. This does not address that. What this will do is bring up supply. What your question would need to be answered, Mr. Legislator, is through zoning. And just to let you know, a first responder in Georgia on his own salary can afford a 1,000 square foot home on a 35-foot lot. That's what it would take. And so that's a question. But Representative Oliver, to let you know, this does not affect zoning. All of this occurs after zoning. All we're trying to do is say, municipalities, you've approved something, you've already approved it. That fight's happened. 15 months like we get it now. So what's the impact of that? Well, there's thousands of lots that have been approved by the local municipalities in zoning. But because of these processes that we've fallen into and these habits, it's taken us 12 months to get a permit. We're budgeting 12 months. Some of the stories you'll hear say 8 months, 9 months. The reality is it only needs about 2 months. That's all it needs. And so I'm just going to tell you a few stories. One, I'm not going to list the counties, but rest assured, these are 3 distinct municipalities that I do business in. One is for a 90-lot neighborhood, already zoned. We submitted the land disturbance permit application in December of 2021. We received the land disturbance permit in March of 2023. 16 working months for a permit delivery on a neighborhood that was already zoned. As a matter of fact, the zoning had occurred in the 70s. That had already been approved. We could have delivered those things much earlier. The amount of changes, the amount of money we spent on fees to attorneys and engineers and all that, all goes through to the end user, the home buyer. And then, so that's a real cost. That's a real case. Another municipality was a 90-lot neighborhood. Preliminary plat was submitted in August of 2023. The land disturbance permit was issued January of 2025. So that's 18 months. That neighborhood and the previous one were fully affordable homes. They were under $400,000. There's a hole in the market for anything in the 300s. Unfortunately, 300s is pretty much an entry-level house in this environment. But that was 18 months of delays where we could have brought that inventory to market. It would have created downward pressure on pricing. But this scarcity that's being created through processes is creating tons of upward pressure on housing. And as the National Association of Realtors pointed out last week, the average age of a first-time home buyer in America right now is 40 years old. We have birth rates that are plunging. We have people who are waiting till they can buy a home until they are having household formation. We all suffer from that. And now what we're saying is you're not allowed to own a home until you're 40, and you're on the tail end of even having children at that point. Another instance was a neighborhood. It was 80 lots. Again, it was going to be the cost leader in the community. We got preliminary plat submitted in February of 2024. This one was good. We got the permit in February of 2025. So that was only 12 months. Of course, it was in a process that should have taken 2 months, but 12 months is better than the other 2. And that delayed that neighborhood. Now, a lot of you are, in doing this, I've been able to meet a lot of you lawmakers, and I admire you for putting your name on a ballot and doing this. It takes a lot. And a lot of you are entrepreneurs, and I really appreciate that. The cost of money is real, and it gets passed straight through to the teacher, police officer, and fireman who need to buy a home. And the reason it has to be is because we have employees we have to pay as well. And so there was another neighborhood, and this touches on the first thing that Austin was talking about with the general agreement between municipal codes and state codes. The state of Georgia has a lot of resources, and it's worked with the International Fire Code, and it established that we don't need 2 entrances to a neighborhood until we have 120 lots. There's municipalities all around Georgia that create their own rules regarding that. My company had a 49 lot would have been the affordable leader in the neighborhood, in the community. The geometry would only allow one entrance, but that was fine because we don't need two entrances till we get to 120 lots, as per the state of Georgia and International Fire Code. This municipality said you need two entrances after 25 lots. Physically, we couldn't do it. Another municipality says you need two entrances at 50 lots. Another municipality says you need it at 75 lots. Well, that makes it impossible. And not only does it hurt the Georgia home buyer and the builder and the developer, but we have a lot of landowners in Georgia. And typically the person I'm buying land from is an 80-year-old person whose family has owned the land for generations, and they've watched everything around them get developed, and this is their moment. And then we basically, through just arbitrary guideline of 25 lots, we made their land worthless. So we think this is a move in the right direction. The ultimate goal is a long way in front of us, but this is a first step. We know what we're doing currently isn't working. 70% of Georgians can't buy homes, 40 years old for a first-time buyer. We know this isn't working, so we can't defend the status quo. And that's about it. If there's any questions, I'd love to entertain those.
Well, you opened Pandora's box by mentioning Representative Montaham. So Representative Montaham, I'm sorry, Chairman Montaham, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I do. Thank you for including me there. I feel special. Thank you. I am special. Thank you, Chairman Hitchens. I need to get that on a framed quote and put in my office. So I know you're talking about the applications that were denied. So we'll start in chronological order. So it seems like 10,000, is that right? You said 10,000 homes were approved in Metro Atlanta, Georgia, or is that a specific region?
We need 35,000 building lots in the next 12 months. We don't think we'll deliver 10,000. And we only delivered 5,000 in the prior.
Those are building lots.
That's right. That's building lots.
And do you keep a record of why the other lots were denied over 10,000?
I'm sorry?
The more than 10,000. So why were they denied? Were they applied for and denied, or?
Well, I know I can only speak from my experience, and some other folks will speak. We had several denied at the zoning level that never made it to the permitting level.
26,000. Is that something that y'all track as an industry, or?
We track the need. We don't track I don't track them. There's maybe an analyst that does the zonings that were rejected. We don't track that.
Let me ask you this way. I understand that there's a need. Do we know that there is enough supply, or is there enough developers in Georgia that can meet that supply?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, we can. We can meet the supply if we're allowed to do it.
And so 36,000 applications were made in that same time period. Were the surety?
No, I don't know that.
Okay, thank you.
I know that's the market.
That's what the demand is, right?
Yes.
We don't know. We don't track that. Maybe that's something that the home builders and the associations can start tracking for us and get us some good numbers on. I don't know. I think that would be a good idea for your association. It would give us some context, right? So I know you talked about you're trying to get that level of affordability, and you said you'd love to have those kind of set, preclusions for only, law enforcement and fire and teachers and these folks who we love dearly. But now, are you advocating for that to happen through stipulations put on in zoning hearing?
Not yet. That's not what this bill does.
But you'd like to see that.
Oh, I would love to see that.
So is that kind of do you just speak for yourself, or do you speak for the home builders here? Or
I think, anybody that speaks behind me can correct me. This bill does not address zoning.
Sure.
It does not address zoning at all. That's going to be a bloody battle.
Well, we're early in this thing, so I'm just trying to figure out where this bill's headed. So I want to make sure if that's what you guys are advocating for, I have to contemplate that. I'm not sure if you guys want to add zoning steps for some of these mandates. So
I don't think we want to add zoning to the bill.
Okay. So can you tell me what county or municipality that was for the LDP is 18 months? That is,
The three examples I gave you were Clayton, Coweta, and the city of Noonan.
okay. In the 18-month example was which county? I'm sorry.
That was Coweta,
That's Coweta County. Can you tell me how many lots there were?
90.
90. So 18 months for 90. That is pretty bad. So the last thing I do want to ask you is this, and that is, you talked about some of the different local ordinances on exits. So you say maybe 1 or 2 exits, and state standard was 120. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct? And so I think this community had 75 homes, and this is something that personally affected your development. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if we were to go in and make these a statewide and say, hey, listen, it's got to be 120, what do you say to communities like our coastal communities who are flood prone, who may have a reason to have 2 exits, or somewhere that is fire prone? I guess my question, the mountains, for example, if I'm building, some mountain housing and you get a, wildfire, you need to have egress, ingress in multiple directions. My question would be, hey, isn't that why we let locals set these things? And then really the B to that is, if we overrule them, does that not just move local issues up to the state level where we have, we don't meet 12 months out of the year. We only meet, 3 months. And of that, only 40 of those days. And so I don't know that we're properly equipped to make decisions that are that geographically based. Does that make sense?
Well, that process exists through DCA. So if there's a unique situation like you're describing, then certainly the municipality can put into DCA. Am I right about that, right? So DCA can authorize a special, that already exists. That already 100% exists, that they can get that consideration if they have a unique situation because of their topography or topo or anything like that. The reality is, if we leave it like it is, 70% of Georgians can't afford a home. A 40-year-old person is buying their first home. This is completely broken. And so what we're proposing is just a first relatively easy step.
So let me ask you to that point. So, but you said that process already exists. So doesn't that process already exist, right? It just happens on a local level?
Well, what the understanding is that they're implementing it without going through the justification process with DCA. All we're saying is that they have to take their case and say, this is why we're doing this. It's not arbitrary. This is a mountainous place. This is heavy timbered land. It needs an entrance for every 3 houses, whatever. That exists. What happens currently is the municipality writes that statute, enforces it, and never involves DCA.
So let's walk through that then. I think that's important for people to understand the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of that. So if a county or a city wants to have an ordinance and say, hey, look, we need to go from 120 to 70, they no longer can take that feedback from their folks without first going and maybe getting geological, geotechnical documentation, could be soil sediment samples and engineering, and all these, which are effectively going to be increased costs, right? They're going to be passed on to the homeowner anyway, because somebody's going to pay for these, either through taxation or fees. I just don't maybe buy it. I'm trying to follow. So then they have to go to a board, that board that we talked about earlier, that has no county commissioners or mayors or city council members, without any policymakers on that board, just their employees, fire code folks. They're the ones who get to make the recommendation. It goes down to DCA board, and then it's a binding approval, yay or nay. Is that correct? Am I kind of following that right?
My understanding is the legislator created the process. We didn't create the process. So whatever, if y'all want to adjust the process, you can certainly do that.
But I think that is the process that's described we're in. Is that correct? maybe I've.
Chairman, I can answer that question. I
Thank
actually
you.
looked it up. So this board exists. It is statutory. It was created by the General Assembly. And we have the ability to adjust that board to be its composition of whatever membership we choose.
Okay.
I can give you the exact OCGA if you want it. Be happy to text it over to you so you'll have it so you can take a look at it. But-
Admittedly, Mr. Chairman, I've got it pulled up on my computer.
yeah, okay, well, good.
Yeah.
So when
Just to be honest with you, right here, we got a special screen right here. So yeah, I think a special screen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that would be my question though, is we got to make sure there's fair representation here because effectively, you could say in some ways you're usurping the voice of the people that live in that community who have voted for people to represent their values and to be a direct representation or reflection of themselves. And so I would have some personal issues with maybe that. So maybe we can work on that language in the interim.
if you'd like to talk to the legislative council and pull something together for us to take a look at, I'm sure the chairman will consider it. I can't speak on his behalf, but he is next on our question. So Chairman Anderson, would you
Thank you.
like to?
Thank you. Just to kind of circle back, you'd made a comment earlier in your presentation that the cost of money is real. For the benefit of the committee, and I know every project is different, every the size and the subsequent costs and that sort of thing, but give us some idea of what kind of interest rate we're talking about for these projects that may get drug out 12 to 18 months, that sort of thing that the typical builder developer is contending with.
Well, the carry cost on that is probably right now 8%. There's real cost and lost opportunity because of the time involved. The market has changed dramatically in the last 20 months. So after permit, it still takes us, we have to budget 12 months to get the roads on the ground and get the project approved. It takes another 6 months before a home is vertical and finished and can be moved in. When the market changes like that, I know my company has had multiple projects that were under contract, and because of the time involved, those contracts got terminated from the builders that we were going to sell the lots to. It's very hard to quantify exactly. I know the 8% is one. The multiple submittals, the attorney's cost, the engineer's cost, the traffic studies that have to be done and redone, and I'm sorry, it's hard to quantify, but I would, I hate to give you a number.
Yeah, no. So it's just based on, kind of shirt sleeve numbers that you're giving us, approximately 8% of the total cost of the project, then
8% of the land buy and all the engineering and planning. So let's say the average land lot cost around North Georgia is $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about $8,000 direct. Maybe hard to, like I said, it may be difficult to quantify exactly, but whatever it costs the developer, there's a margin that he has to charge the builder, and the builder has to charge a margin on top of that to the home buyer. And so whatever that cost is, by the time the home buyer gets it, it's about double.
right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Knight, I would tell you, thank you for presenting today. You're off the hot seat.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Next, Austin, I have you next on the list, but I'm going to assume that you've already done your presentation, or do you have a separate presentation? That's fine. Let me turn on your audio here real quick.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce the president of the Home Builders Association of Georgia, Mr. Gabe Chatham is behind me, and we've got a couple of builders and developers from around the state that would like to share their experiences.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Gabe Chatham, president of the Home Builders Association of Georgia, and actually live Representative Thomas's district in the Chatham neighborhood, and certainly thankful to have that opportunity. Really, we've got a lot of great practitioners here in the room that would also like to share, just like Jay did a moment ago. For our family, we're third generation home builders, developers, real estate brokers. And so, for us, we've grown up in this business, love the opportunity to create quality housing in the communities that we live in. And after serving in this role, we've had a chance to work through several legislative sessions. We've got, a great team with Austin and Miss Cindy helping us kind of shepherd us through this process. So there's no real easy way to fix all the housing issues that we've talked about. So what we've tried to do is how could we isolate this one issue of the permitting process on the land disturbance permit side? So as we've said before, everything here is post zoning. I know zoning is its own large discussion, and that certainly has its time and place. But really, we've just tried to say on this land disturbance permit issue, we want to really isolate it and talk through the specifics of that. And so, just a little bit of the mechanics of it. We're hiring professional engineers to design these communities, and again, we already know the lot count. None of that changes in this process. So these professionals then submit plans to the great local staffs, whether it's the counties or the cities that we're working in. And so these professionals also review. So really, we're just trying to say we're not changing what they do, but just instead the timeline of that process, not certainly trying to take away any of their opportunities, but instead to say, how can we streamline this? How can we help create these already approved lots? Again, this doesn't change the lot count, already approved lots in a quicker fashion. And so that's a big part of what we do. And, again, all these other issues we want to try to address at some point in some venue, but really this just comes down to this permit process for the land disturbance permitting. And we've got friends from across the state that also have their stories to share. But we're certainly, again, appreciative of the opportunity to kind of share what we're proposing here today.
So, Austin, do you have two presenters? Okay. There you go.
Next presenter is Mr. Mark Ivy from the Augusta area.
Afternoon. Thank you for your time. My name is Mark Ivy. I'm a home builder developer in the Augusta, Georgia market. I'm a little bit uniquely qualified in that I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Georgia. And so I've done the plan preparing, I've done plan review, and now I actually develop projects as well. And I hear a lot of emotion today about zoning and housing affordability. And those are all issues within the state of Georgia. But this bill really is more of a procedure bill. What is going to be our procedure for getting plans approved? Like Gabe said, engineers are involved. They prepare these plans. They go to great lengths to make sure that they meet the requirements of the local jurisdiction. They then have a local person or a third-party engineer that reviews those plans and issues the permit. The problem is, I've got two stories. It's a tale of two projects. So the first project, and these are both about 100 lot subdivisions. The first project, the civil engineer, he loads the plans into the portal for the locus jurisdiction. Those plans are then distributed to every department. Well, what departments are you talking about? Well, we've got planning, we've got engineering, we've got water and sewer, we've got traffic, we've got GIS, we've got fire, we've got trees and parks, and we, some cases, have mosquito. So there's a mosquito department. So they get 45 days to review those plans, and usually by about day 44, you've got about 2/3 of the departments that have given you comments or approval, and you have to start making phone calls. And then the other departments will issue their comments or approval. So if you have any comments, you then send it back to the engineer. He makes the changes. It goes back to the portal again. It gets sent to every department as a brand new project, essentially. The clock resets, and they all issue comments again. This goes on usually about 3 times before you finally get to the end and can get your approvals. So on average, that gives us about a 6 to 8 month process of getting these plans approved. And some of this could be GIS gave you the approval on the very first submittal, and their approval was based on the road names. But you still have to get their approval every time when you submit the plans back. And if they forget to review them thinking, well, we already approved that set, well, it still holds you up to that 45-day. Project number 2 is in an adjacent county, and we do the same thing. We upload the plans to the portal. The plans are distributed to all the departments, same departments, although I don't think they have a mosquito. After 14 days, and rarely is it even 14 days, we have all our comments from every department and a red line set of plans. We give that back to our engineer. He makes the revisions. We submit again. And usually within 14 days, we have all those comments back again. If it's minor comments, that department will call the engineer and say, I've got these 2 things for you to do. Make those changes, submit your plans for stamping. That jurisdiction, I can generally get an LDP in 2 months. So what's the difference between the 2 jurisdictions? Is it staffing? Is it competency of the staffing? Is it the competency of the engineer preparing the plans? So there's a lot of things that go into that. And this is the same engineer in both jurisdictions for both of these projects. So it wasn't the engineer. It was the competency or the staffing level that each jurisdiction have. And so I, as a builder, contractor, engineer, there's all kinds of standards, all kinds of requirements that I have to meet. All we're asking is simply to put guidelines in place that says, hey, if we're going to require you as a land developer to get an LDP, then we're going to require the local jurisdictions to at least have a reasonable timeline for reviewing plans and issuing the permits. And so that's all we're asking for is let's establish a reasonable timeline to be able to get those issued. Both of these jurisdictions also serve on an advisory committee for the county managers. And one's been in existence for a little over a year now, and that's the one that's turning plans in 14 days. The other one, we had our first meeting about a month ago, and we hope to get them to where they're meeting what's in this bill, 45 days on the first review and 14 days on subsequent reviews. And so we know it can be done. In talking with both of these jurisdictions, it can be done. It's just a matter of having the either requirement to get it done or the willpower to get it done. Also, another thing that wasn't talked about a whole lot was the first part of the bill that Austin mentioned. We had the situation in one jurisdiction where a new chief building official decided that all residential slabs will have to have liquid treatment for termites. And our market is all bait stations around the house. So when he made that requirement, it shook everything up, and all of our local pest control companies pushed back. They said that is not what needs to be done in this market. And actually, we took that to Austin, and he helped us craft a letter back to the building official and that local community and got that removed. But there needs to be some type of procedure for a builder developer. If there's a jurisdiction that you think is being burdensome on some of their requirements, then there needs to be a procedure for us to at least have a sounding board. And I think that's what DCA's process is. It just gives us that sounding board. So happy to answer any questions that you may have on anything that I've talked about, but I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, open floor questions. Representative Oliver.
Have anybody, I assume somebody's asked ACCG, what is the reasonable number? Is it 14 or 21? And since ACG is testifying, I'm sure they'll answer that question for us.
I can tell you on the 2 advisory committees that I serve on locally, the one that does it in 14 days said they would continue to turn them in 14 days. The other one that's 45, 45, 45, they've indicated that they could easily do 30 and probably could get to 14.
Thank you. We'll hear from ACCG about their answer. Thank you very much. Helpful.
With that, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I believe you said you had one more. Okay, let me turn on your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next guest is Mr. Brian Wardlaw from the Savannah market. And while he's walking up, I'd like to clarify one thing that Mr. Ivy said about the pest control letter that they developed. And that in his example of the local official who just made a decision about a portion of the code book that he wanted to amend on his own, our letter pushing back on that activity today doesn't do anything but push them in the direction of going to DCA to work through this process and get that local amendment approved. Under this proposal, that wouldn't change at all, except some group of stakeholders at DCA would review that application, and this whole thing would happen in public with the elected policymakers making that request of the state and making that case to those decision makers. So our letter today was really just an advisory of the current law.
But I think you pointed out a fair problem. And that's when inspectors decide to take their own approach to what the code says and what it doesn't. I'm going to give you a case point real fast and I'll let you speak. I just had a new air conditioner put into my house. and it had a 240-volt junction box. And the air conditioner contractor told me I couldn't put it in because the code official told them that you can't have a junction box for 240-volt electricity. And I said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You can absolutely do that. They said, no, you can't. They made them rip it out in Cobb County. Called Cobb County out. Made them rip it out in Cobb County and redo a home run for that, which was a substantial amount of money. So I do see that there is some issue with this, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to parlay on this, but please, by all means, sir, the mic's yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee, for allowing us to speak. My name is Brian Wardlaw from Savannah, Georgia, Chatham County Market. And just won't try to relay any information you've already heard here today, but more how it pertains to my particular area. Again, Chatham County and its surrounding counties, we are seeing a heavy growth of in the labor force due to the new Hyundai plant that has opened. Expected when everything is fully operational with all their partners, is about 40,000 new jobs will be needed in our area. Right now, the expected housing supply is about 6,000 units per year due to a Georgia Tech institutional housing supply study they just ran. We are putting out about 60% of those permits every year, falling thousands short on the supply. So I just wanted to speak to the supply and how this bill can help streamline those, as we are seeing in our area on a short term, as others have already eloquently spoke, about 6 months on the earliest on permits. It can go even longer. And again, it's due to that 45 more. And we are seeing a minimum of 3 turnarounds. A lot of the times that these comment periods are sent back are due to minor infractions on plans, whether it's font size or labeling. That could probably where they would shore up those times and be able to deliver them in a faster timeline. Again, I don't want to go over any financials that have already been put out there, but we are coming from a market where on the coast, we have our own problems and that come up on plans that need reviewed that might not be up here, but in other markets that have been able to do it in a shorter time period. So thank you for your time. Any questions?
Seeing none, thank you very much. Mr. Hackney, I believe that ends all the speakers that you have. So we're going to go ahead and move on farther down the agenda here. Next on the list of speakers is Jeff Ledford, the Georgia Association of Realtors. Jeff, if you don't mind, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As the realtors, we have consistently been up year after year to advocate for more affordable and attainable housing. This bill does exactly that. We're in a situation right now where our housing climate is year after year growing. I think you had mentioned about a significant jump in the valuation of property in just a 3-year period, and that is simply because of supply and demand. We are not seeing the development and building of homes at the rate that we need to be at. Year after year, we are getting further into that deficit. I just returned from our national conference, and our national economist has put a projection on the next year of at least a 4% increase in the price of a home, despite the fact that we're already at a very high rate of the increases going from from the early pandemic era until now. We've seen a year-over-year increase that has really kind of outpaced what you typically see, as you stated earlier. Currently, I believe we're at a 27% rate, is the 27% of the cost of a new home is because a lot of the regulatory compliance, and a lot of that is exacerbated on the wait time. The longer you're having to sit on the property before you can develop it, which goes right back to the permitting, the higher the cost of that home is going to be. So of all the things we can be looking at, I always say there's no one magic pill to how we can have more attainable housing, but we can start filling the medicine cabinet with the right pills that we need to have. This is one of those. So we are in support of it and offer anything we can do to assist.
Questions, Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Moving down the list here. Mark Woodall, General Contractors. Come on down.
I'm sure you got the right Mark Woodall.
It says on here, Mark Woodall, Associated General Contractors.
We are very happy to support the recommendations of the home builders and all the commenters so far, but don't really have anything else prepared, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a ton of questions for you.
Go for it.
Thank you. All right. Kennedy Atkins, Georgia Public Policy Foundation.
Thomas, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today in support of HB 812. My name is Kennedy Atkins. I'm with the Georgia Public Policy Foundation and Georgia Policy Impact. Since 2021, the foundation has researched issues affecting Georgia's housing market, including how regulation influences the price of new homes. We recognize that the rising cost of housing is impacting both rural and urban communities. Simply put, Georgia is not building enough homes to meet demand, especially when you consider that Georgia is adding more than 1 million new residents each decade. Last month, we released a new study focused on housing supply. We found that 94 of Georgia's 159 counties are experiencing a housing shortage. Among those counties, the average shortage is nearly 3,900 units, while the median shortage is closer to 1,000 units. One of the most effective ways to begin closing this gap is to ensure building permits are processed in a timely and predictable manner. Delays increase project costs and uncertainty for builders, and those higher costs are ultimately passed on to home buyers. It's also important to note that permitting process takes place after all land use and zoning decisions have been made. Quite simply, this would simplify the timeline for builders and developers to break ground on the type of housing that has already been approved. This is not a new idea. Comparable legislation has been implemented in Arizona and Kansas, as well as Oregon and Idaho. In Arizona, the Common Sense Institute found that the state's Permit Freedom Act reduced permitting and development timelines by 7%. Across the jurisdictions they reviewed, the average permit closeout time fell from 200 days in 2022 to 126 days in 2024. They estimate that reform in Arizona will add about 3,800 more homes per year and reduce and result in a 5% reduction in housing prices. As Chairman Chokas mentioned, this is just one way to allow more housing to be built, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. You have one flashing light here, Chairman Montaham. I'm going to get used to that, I promise, Mr. Chairman.
Me too, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. I've been following the Georgia public policy posts on this issue. I think it's interesting. So you would say that there's an affordability issue, correct? I mean, that's
yes, sir.
Kind of the premise on which the argument's built in your articles and research so far. So in Paulding County, we definitely have an affordability issue, but it may be on another side of the coin, which is what I think the Public Policy Institute's missing here. And that is, so right now, I'm going to run you through some numbers, and this is for the edification of this committee as well. That is the school M&O in Paulding County, 17.67. The county M&O is 4.3. The county bond millage is 0.8. The assessment ratio is 0.4. The average cost of local education, this is your local share for education costs per pupil in the Paulding County School District, is $4,900. And the average amount of students in a new home built for an affordable housing, which is for young families, is 1.7. What does that mean? It means on a $400,000 home, they're bringing in school taxes of about $2,828 all together. The local cost of all students in that home is $8,330. The deficit created to the county and the taxpayer is about $4,686. And so this home covers just a little bit of the cost of educating, protecting the fire, the police, and everything else. So that if you look at the total cost of doing business there, because these homes are not like legacy homes in our community. These are greenfield homes, which means they require new schools to be built, new fire stations. They require more police and more roads. And so when you start building a 100-home neighborhood, it generates upwards of $468,600 worth of deficit that has to be covered by existing taxpayers in Paulding County. As people would say, you can't build yourself out of taxes. And that's been so in Paulding County, Georgia. And I think to the point, and with all due respect to the Public Policy Foundation, your research doesn't apply in Paulding County. We're not seeing these same effects. We're 91% residential tax base. That means that only 11% is either commercial industrial mix. And we're not seeing those industries and businesses coming into Paulding County to absorb some of these taxes. And so I just want to refute that and go on the record on behalf of the people of Paulding County, Georgia, who maybe don't see the same dynamics or the same math that's coming into the rest of the state. And while I respect that we are here as lawmakers and policymakers to make decisions on behalf of the state, maybe this ain't the best thing for Paulding County, Georgia. Thank you.
There we go. All right. With that being said, we're going to move on. I have, David Patterson. Is David in here? David, hey, coming up, David. If you could say your name and company and give us a quick rundown.
Yeah, my name is David Patterson. I'm a builder and developer, mainly in the North Metro. So we generally, either develop home or develop the neighborhoods for ourselves. We also have a company that develops neighborhoods for national home builders. And then on the other side of our company, we also build the homes, sell to consumers. So we have kind of a good view from all sides of it, not just land development, but also on the home building side. So I have just two quick projects that I can kind of give you real numbers of what the consequences of the prolonged LDP process that we're seeing currently in multiple different municipalities as well. It's not just one specifically. I'll say it's kind of all over everywhere we operate. So we have one neighborhood that was already currently zoned, already way past that. We've applied for LDP permit. Generally, we allow for about 6 months for general LDP permit to come in. That's what we were seeing a few years ago, like say 4 or 5 years ago. So as we've kind of prolonged that, you were able to get it in 4 months. We went to 6 months, and the current project that we were anticipating, a 6-month hold prior to LDP, then beginning to start construction on the neighborhood, turned into approximately 12 to 13 months. Interest carry, also having to pay multiple engineers for 4, 5, 6 submittals, where we're actually just changing minor things such as text, labeled a certain way. Our engineer has a couple comments that they've gotten. The municipality has made are wanting measurements up to the 100th. So they're getting very, very specific, where it's not exactly a code requirement by any means, where that LDP should be issued. We're starting to get hung up on just minor things that a code, reviewer is looking at, not in the lens of an engineer, but just in the lens of, well, someone told me that I've got to have this on this LDP. Not that it makes a difference for development, not that it makes a difference of us being able to put those lots in the ground, just that they were told to put that on an LDP. And that's the comment that is, being put on there and stopping those comments. And, also one of the one of the issues we're having too is that they we'll continuously get comments through the process, which we would expect, in that first round of comments. Those comments will then show up again on this fourth round of comments. Where that item that they may have recommended or redlined has been changed. It's just coming back up again, and we continuously get comments back from our reviewers that, oh, we're sorry, we missed it. We missed it. And it's continuously going down, and we're in 6 to 12 months of constant review and constant money spent from loans. A lot of our neighborhoods on the property, we will purchase the property even after zoning. One specifically, and again, we're prepared for 6 months of a hold time. We're into the 12-month, 13-month, real cost on that project. That its cost from delays is approximately $250,000 to $350,000. That's on one project. It's a 66 lot neighborhood. When we start continuously making these projects go longer and longer on the front end, that's where our costs for our back end of our houses are having to go up and up. Where some of these deals may just not even make sense anymore, So that's one of our developments. We have multiple other ones that, very, very similar instances, all same comments, some issues. So, I think just being able to have a clear understanding of what we should be expecting as we're turning in LDP permits after the zonings are already complete. This is really just a formality. It's to make sure that these neighborhoods are being constructed how the engineers have said that they're going to be constructed, and that we're meeting all code requirements. So appreciate you guys' time, and thank you very much for letting me talk.
Thank you. See no questions at this point. I'm going to step in for just a moment. Chairman Thomas had to step out to take an important phone call, I think from his kid's school. Maybe it's not a problem. We're going to move on down the agenda now. I'd like to invite Kaylin Day from the Governmental Affairs Associate with ACCG. And I think, Kaylin, you have with you Katie Parker from Cherokee County. If y'all would.
GMA will also be joining us.
Okay. And Noah Renitz from GMA is going to join, so we're going to have a joint presentation here, and I'll just turn the microphone over to you guys.
A little bit. Chairman, I might ask you a favor. Given there's three of us, could we relieve y'all at the front table for a little bit? Would that be fine, Representative?
Yeah, that's fine. I apologize for stepping out when I see Arnold Mill Elementary School on my phone. I'm like, oh, I got to take that one. So.
Get you out of the hot seat for a little bit. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Noah Renitz. I'm a Senior Governmental Relations Associate for the Georgia Municipal Association, and I'll let my colleagues here introduce themselves before we begin.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Kaylin Day with ACCG. I've brought along Katie Parker with me from Cherokee County. She is the Development Projects Director, so she's our boots on the ground knowledge today.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation in a more drawn out manner. I know if we had this subcommittee meet during session, there's no way we could have been able to have this level of testimony and involvement from everybody that's in this room. So I appreciate that opportunity. I also want to say that we have had the opportunity to discuss with the home builders and the developers this legislation. They kind of alluded to it last session. We had some meetings in March. We've talked with them in the off season, and I've also had the opportunity to speak with the bill sponsor. Now, I will let you all know very plainly, I've had to learn more about land disturbance permits in the past month than I ever cared to know. But I didn't do this endeavor by myself. I reached out to the state EPD, and I said, I need a list of every single local issuing authority in the state of Georgia. And they sent me that list. Local issuing authorities are the local jurisdictions that have the ability to effectuate and issue these permits. I'll tell you, of local issuing authorities, about 240 of them are cities. So when I speak at large to my membership, we're talking about 40 to 45% of my membership, Georgia cities, are local issuing authorities. Now, there's even a more important distinction to make. There's types of local issuing authorities. There's local issuing authorities with an MOA and without an MOA. In a jurisdiction where a city is not the local issuing authority, if a developer wants to come through, they still have to pull a land disturbance permit, but they just deal with the state. They go to Georgia Soil and Water, they go to EPD. The same regulations are in place. If they're in a jurisdiction where a city is the local issuing authority, that city can promulgate parts of that permit. If they are a city that is an LIA with an MOA with the state, we're talking about EPD and Georgia Soil and Water, they can effectuate lock, stock, and barrel the entirety of that permit, the entire environmental review. They have the trained staff. They are certified by EPD to do just that job. So this is not a responsibility that we take lightly, but you may ask, why do cities do this? We only get involved in this process to expedite it. It has been discussed at length in this committee's zoning today. Is this a zoning issue? This is not a zoning issue. This is about permitting in process. If a city did not want one of these developments to come in, there's no need for them to string out the permit review process. They would just deny it in a zoning hearing, which is we have the power to do. We'd put in a development, we'd put in a restriction on new development. That's what we'd do. The permitting process is not being used or weaponized in any form or fashion. So I reached out to all 240 LIAs that are cities, and I asked them a series of questions about this bill. And let me just say this, cities themselves are not opposed to the idea of streamlining the permitting process. In fact, the feedback I received showed that many of my members already operate within internal deadlines that are equal to or faster than those laid forth in this bill. They can effectuate LDP review and issuance in as little to 10 to 30 business days. We recognize that time is money for developers, and we want to be good partners in that, but the timelines alone don't paint the full picture. The shot clock that's within this bill, which is basically two-part, 45-day upon first receipt and 14-day upon revision and revision, that fails to differentiate between routine residential plans and large-scale mixed-use developments with major utility and stormwater impacts. Representative Sanchez, you were the one that brought it to the committee's attention that said this is not just residential developments. No, it's not. A land disturbance permit is required when you are disturbing land of an acre or more. An acre or more for any type of development. And what we are hearing from city officials is the complexity of these projects over time has increased tenfold. It is an unfortunate byproduct of the recession in this state, but we lost a lot of small community home builders. What we are left with is large nationwide syndicates that develop hundreds of units at a time. The complexity, the review process, the environmental stipulations that are not dictated at the local level, but are federal and state regulations that we are bound to enforce as local issuing authorities still hold true. The 45-day deadline and the 14-day window treat multi-departmental coordination between zoning, engineering, and utilities as if it happens in a vacuum, as if cities are only reviewing one application at a time. And it gives cities no recourse when applicants revise major portions of their plan during resubmission, even though this is extremely common. In discussing this bill with a colleague that works at the Capitol, they gave me an analogy that I'm going to steal and I'm going to use. Under the pretenses put forth in House Bill 812, a developer gets to take a test. And they can wing it. They can completely fail the test. This legislation would compel the city engineering staff, the city permit review team, to give the local citations, that the local ordinances that have been violated, the state law that has not been recognized within the permit, or the federal regulation that has been missed. We would have to issue and effectuate that back on the permit. We have just done the homework for the developer. They have outsourced their engineering, their planning to the city. Now, our departments would have to own that. That's impossible. We cannot do that. That's not our job. So as we move forward, we must be honest about the root causes of delay. In our outreach to cities, I asked them directly, why do LDPs sometimes get stuck? Because they absolutely do. Those examples of 10 months, 12 months, 18 months, I'm not here to say that those aren't happening. They do happen in some instances. But the top reasons weren't politics and they were not obstruction. They were incomplete submittals, unlicensed engineers drawing plans, repeated revisions that introduced new scopes to the developments, and understaffing in fast-growing communities. This is a quote. As one planner put it, it's not that we're slow, it's just that every resubmission sets a moving target that we are expected to hit every single time. We agree that developers should receive clear expectations. for what a land disturbance permit means, but the law must also expect complete, consistent submittals in return from them. There's no reason that we should be subject to a shot clock when the first bite at the apple we get is on an incomplete or wholly incorrect application. The unintended consequences of this bill can be named, but there's no consideration for natural disasters or staff shortages, third-party agency delays, if a local government is liaising with its county, if we are liaising with a state agency, if we are liaising with GDOT or the health department. Public safety and engineering reviews cannot be compressed. If cities are forced to meet hard deadlines without flexibility, we fear that the likely result will be blanket denials for incomplete applications rather than a collaborative review process, or worse, the rubber stamping of applications without any adequate scrutiny. Neither of those outcomes serve the public interest. As we look forward, I think defining what a complete submittal looks like is absolutely necessary if we're going to move in the direction of a shot clock. I can tell you candidly, I have spoke with other individuals that do my job in other states. A shot clock bill is not new. This is not a novel idea. Other states have something very similar to this on the books already. And what they have told us is that they they compromised on legislation, and what they have found is that developers do bring more complete applications. There's not so much of a back and forth because it's a whole product upon receipt. I'm not saying that's the direction we should head or should not head. I'm just saying that is anecdotally what I've heard from other groups that do this job. So I'll kind of in closing, before I pass it off to my colleagues here, Georgia cities are not looking to delay or deny responsibility or responsible development, but we do want to ensure that our communities can grow in a way that is safe, compliant, and well-served by its infrastructure. 812 in its current form places the entire burden on local governments without requiring equal accountability from applicants. We urge this committee to consider thoughtful amendments on this legislation should it move forward. And I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions as we move forward.
Excuse me. Thank you, Noah. I just have to say, we also surveyed our membership and spoke with those, our counties that are LIAs and have almost the exact same concerns. I mean, ultimately, end of the day, the number one thing that they all were saying was they're getting blank submittals. They're not getting good plans given to them. So I understand the concerns around staffing and resources and stuff, but all the staff in the world is not going to change an incomplete plan being given to you. The county has no control over that. I don't want to rehash a lot of the things Noah said, but I just want to highlight those main points of there is no complexity consideration in this bill for the type of projects that would go through this process. You would be considering a very simple project the same as you would be considering you would have the same timeline, so to speak, and for a project encompassing hundreds of acres of complex topography and hydrology, as well as limiting it just to 2 rounds. When speaking to our membership, they said not only is that not very reasonable, it also doesn't let them truly do the due diligence that is not only expected of them, but required. Secondly, the bill, again, does not consider third-party agencies that might get involved. EPD often has to get involved when there's certain conditions that are met. The counties have, and while they do their job well, this is not a knock on them, the counties have no purview over that, but we're still looking at the same timeline. And you know who the onus is on if you don't meet the timeline? The county. Also, other groups such as the Army Corps of Engineers, another great institution. If you do anything around Lake Lanier, Lake Allatoona, again, you need things from them that you can't approve the permit without. You're on their timeline. This bill gives no credence to that. Lastly, I do want to touch on section 1 of the bill that refers to DCA. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, I took a lot of notes. I'd like to comment that the bill does require DCA's approval of local amendments, where currently we do not have that system. If you're going above the state minimum building codes. Georgia's diverse landscapes, from the mountains to the sea, is a part of our unique beauty. I think we all really appreciate that. But I think this just hammers home how necessary home rule is in this. I know it was mentioned earlier, Representative Montana, about on the coast, they're going to have different, or in flooding areas, they just have different requirements because they want to be responsive to the jurisdictions they live in. And while there is a process for DCDA to approve, reject already, or stay neutral, from speaking to our membership, there's been plenty of times where they've asked to remain neutral, and those amendments have gone forward. I just question, if a county or any local government has to wait on a board of volunteers to meet to think about these amendments, how far of a delay is getting pushed within that in itself? Again, our points are very similar to Noah's, but I think that this is a very important considerations. I just want to quickly turn it over to Katie Parker with Cherokee County to speak a little bit more from the practitioner standpoint.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Parker, and I am the Development Projects Director for Cherokee County. We are one of the counties up there that definitely have been experiencing a lot of growth. So my particular role is I am the liaison between the county and the engineers, the developers. So I'm frontline. I see it all day long. I get the phone calls if we're running behind or where we are on the submittal process. So I see it firsthand on what we're doing. Our particular process is we do a good job on getting our plan review out. We give ourselves 7 to 10 days. Usually by 14 business days, I'm looking up, trying to figure out what's going on, where are we holding on to, what's taking us longer. A lot of those we're working with the design professionals to try to get the plans approved or closer to an approval process. So all of that is, if we can't get it done in that 14 days, then our hands are kind of tied. So that's a concern for us on that second submittal. We don't want to return a plan if we're that close. We want to be able to work through some of those things. So a conditional approvals is kind of what we're looking for. The biggest problem that I see with a submittal process, it's definitely the first go around, is we do get incomplete submittals. We're missing tree protection plans. We're missing some of the traffic study. We're missing some of those kind of key components that would really give us a really good shot to get that plan review done quickly. And a lot of times if you're missing those projects and we do go ahead and review it, it's going to change your design on the second go around. So we're basically looking at a secondary plan because you've now got your tree plan, you've got specimen trees to take care of, you've got state's waters that have been identified during that process. That's going to change your plan. It's going to change your design. So having the time to be able to vet all of that up front and then in secondary resubmittals is really important to make sure that we're taking care of the county. We're getting the builders everything that they need so they can get their construction on the ground, but we're also taking care of the downstream neighbors and we're not flooding them out with some stormwater concerns and, that we didn't vet it long enough to make sure that all of that is there. We rely heavily on the engineers to do a good job on their submittals. And the bandwidth right now with engineering companies is very low. So we're getting bad submittals up front. I'll see a submittal that comes in and that's got a completely different jurisdiction on the front cover. We can't review something that says Gwinnett County or something like that. So that's a big thing that we run into constantly, and it's daily. But we have things in place that will help through that. We have the tools necessary. Cherokee County offers a concept review meeting before the project even gets started, before it's even after it's gone through the zoning and we know what we're looking at. We'll bring the concept in, we'll look at it, we'll talk to the engineers, we'll give us their concerns about buffers that they may need or things that they didn't even come across to. So we have that kind of built into our process to be able to not have this issue. But the fact is we still have that timeline. So we can turn a plan review around for a land disturbance permit 4 to 6 months. And that is our review within 2, maybe 3 weeks if it's a big project and it's got a lot going on. But then we have to wait for the engineers to turn around and get that resubmittal back in. Sometimes that takes 2 to 3, 4 weeks sometimes. Then builders are calling me, hey, where are we in the process? And I look it up and I'm like, hey, I'm waiting on a resubmittal. Call your engineer. So none of that is built into this to be able to, work through that kind of thing. We would love to get it going, to keep it moving, because we have to rally our guys. And if we could just keep moving forward, we're not stopping on that process. The other side of that is once we get an LDP process approved, you have a lot of infrastructure that has to go in before you can plat it. So before you can subdivide that property to be able to sell those lots, to be able to put that house on the ground, you've got to wait for that construction period. That's on the developer. That's on the builders and the developer. That could take anywhere from 10 to 12 months. So yeah, that time frame is built into that whole approval for us to be able to get that on the ground. So once you get that construction ready, your plat is looking at, we're moving through that process. And, you know, that's the last step that the county has to be able to make sure everything's right, to make sure that the downstream owners or the lakes that are being impacted, make sure that all of that is right before the builders are let go and they can do their permits. So that, from my standpoint and what I do, I wouldn't have a job if I didn't, if I wasn't moving these processes along. So I feel like, you know, maybe it's a jurisdictional thing and maybe that's kind of where the holdup is. I don't know that because I only have 2 jurisdictions that I've been with. But I know that, you know, we have the means and the methods to be able to do that. I just don't know if a bill requiring some of those would really do a lot of good. It may turn around and cause a lot of problems at the end, which is still going to cost money because of all the changes that you make. Then you're going to go back through plan review, and then you're going to start over with time also. So I'm just not sure if that bill really bakes in all of the nuances and the topography challenges and the streams and all of the stuff that the county protects through those plan review times.
Okay, so you have several questions. I'm assuming that we're done with testimony. Okay, all right. We'll start off with Chairman Montaham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony today. I think that was benefit. I do have a question about the cost. So when you talk about the shot clock and basically you're going to have to increase the amount of employees available at any given moment, right? So for them to be able to process within the time of the shot clock, is that a correct characterization of what you said?
Yes, sir, I would think so. A lot of our particular reviewers pull double duty anyway. We don't have one specific reviewer for just a reviewer. They also do inspections. They also do complaints. They also handle things like that. So in order to just have a dedicated plan reviewer on the stormwater side, that's a person. On the erosion control side, that's a person. So you could be looking at multiple employees for specific review portions and disciplines for that.
And those fees, as you're having to hire more employees, so let's just move there. That's going to what? Go to your county M&O? Is that correct? Or your municipal M&O or
General fund budgets.
general fund budgets, right? Which may, depending on how assessments are, increase the burden on taxpayers, correct?
There's regulatory flow through, right? There was a House Bill 2 years ago, House Bill 302, that talked about the cost of regulation at the local level, and that the cost of fines and permit charges must be directly proximal to the cost of actually doing that business. So that cost would likely be borne by maybe the developer in that instance. If we had to hire more staff in order to effectuate the timelines as necessary, the cost of the permit could potentially go up. In turn, who's paying for that? The people who are purchasing the homes at the end of the day. So whether it's some of it's being pushed out of a general fund budget at the city level or some of it's being turned into increased permit costs, you're going to get it one way or another.
Ultimately, one way or another,
Yes.
the homeowner is going to bear the cost of the regulation, right? And that's what we're doing, right? We're asking for more inspectors, planners, and the rest there to do those reviews. But I want to be very clear, and that is that, well, let me ask you this question. As part of those negotiations, say somebody turns in a set of plans to you. Have you ever found that cities or counties may come back and say, well, we'd like you to do this, but we need this bit of your land, or we need this bit of your property? Is that something that you've seen counties or cities do?
I don't want to speak to something like that never happens, just because when we surveyed our membership, we didn't specifically ask about anything about that. So I'll say no, I have not heard that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that, once it gets to the land disturbance permits and once it gets to our part, any of that's already worked out if that was the case. So I don't know of anything that I've never been directly involved in any of that.
I think, and I'll go on a limb here and think that some of these developers that are here today are frustrated with the aspect of the regulatory framework of each county municipality being effectively a moving target yourself. And lots of times, and I found this as well, is that a county or municipality will go back to a developer with their wish list, effectively treating a developer like a piggy bank. And I think that the nature of treating developers and folks who are trying to build housing in that way is negative to the overall culture and leads us to have discussions like we're having today. And I would ask that y'all tell your members that when they're working with developers, that these guys aren't piggy banks. They're here
Right.
to do a job.
Right.
That they are, yeah. In fact, I do some commercial work, and I found that to be true. I've seen where counties and cities will come in and effectively extort business owners and developers of their land and property. And really, that has to be contemplated in these changes as well. And I hope that y'all will bring some recommendations on how you're going to tamp that down going forward. And so in effect, a lot of times I found that a city or county will ask for things like, they'll say, well, you need to put in on, let's say, a $750,000 development. A city or a county will ask for $1 million interchange at an intersection, or acceleration lanes that are seemingly useless or are not serving the public safety, but rather just there to seemingly increase the cost on a development. This is maybe why y'all are getting somewhat of a bad rap too today. I would ask that you guys don't presume people to be guilty, and developers and builders guilty, but presume to be innocent, and that you should share some cost of the burden if you believe that there is a traffic plan or study required, that y'all share some of that burden as well. And I think that may be part of this fair balance that we'll find today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but it's actually Sanchez. Representative Sanchez, you're up.
Thank you so much, Chair. And just real quick with the Chairman Montahan, that, I do think that it goes the other way around, where developers like to see the government as a piggy bank. But back to the point. So I did hear, gentleman from GMA, you talked about that people from other states where they have had this law passed, they said, just to clarify, you said that they had more complete applications at the very beginning of the process because of it, or what was your, I don't know if I heard you correctly on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me clarify. So I spoke with, I work for the Georgia Municipal Association. There's a Florida League of Cities. There's a South Carolina League of Cities and Towns.
Right.
People do my job in other states. A shot clock type permitting bill is not novel.
Right.
This exists in other jurisdictions in some form or fashion. I believe I heard Arizona, the gentleman from the Public Policy Foundation had mentioned Arizona. In the states where they have this or something similar to this, what we have heard is that an unintended consequence was, this is maybe posed as a punishment for cities. Hey, you have to do this within 45 days. Those bills in those legislatures in those states were able to be augmented in a way in which more complete applications were received upon the initial review, right?
Mhm.
So the developers came in a more correct manner with a completed application. So that's anecdotal evidence from other states that I have heard that have had these fights and have gone back and forth, because permitting delays is not an issue that's singular to Georgia. It's
Right.
nationwide, with complexity of projects and the burden that has been placed on local governments at the local level to effectuate federal regulations and state laws around erosion and soil. So
Right. So I guess the follow-up question that is that, are you saying that effectively this bill, if amended to have a little bit more accountability from the developer side, would ease some of the issues you have, or correct me if that?
I believe that's a step in the right direction.
Okay.
I believe that's a step in the right direction.
Thank you.
Representative Oliver.
Thank you. I find your argument that there's a wide variety of different applications that have from complex to simple, compelling. In the other states that have done these kind of arbitrary timelines, have they attempted to define in any way different kinds of project applications? The permit application for Atlantic Station Brownfield is different than a 10-house subdivision.
But that's a good question. I will look into it and I can get back to you. I can pull specifics.
Thank you. In relation to the biggest problem you cite, incomplete applications, do the developers agree with you that their applications are incomplete? I'm really surprised when we're hearing that most of your development permitting people are national, professional, large entity people, that putting the wrong Gwinnett County page on top of a Cherokee County application seems a little bit inconsistent with what you tell me your product. Do they agree that they've messed up?
They do. A lot of times they'll call me ahead of time and say, hey, just heads up, this project's incomplete, but we've got a closing date that we've got to hit. So we need to get it in review. We need to get it as close as we can do. How far off are we? So a lot of times the county winds up doing the QC on projects like
How do
that.
we fix that?
I think it's just really the bandwidth is a lot of the problem. You know, we've got a lot
Their
of
bandwidth or your bandwidth?
theirs on their side, on the engineering side of things. You know, there's just a lot of engineers out there that are new to the process. They're newer engineers. And it's just, I believe it's more of just getting the communication out there and meeting with the teams and getting that, having that open forum between us as the jurisdictions and the engineers and the developers, and not putting us against each other, and having that open line of communication where at any time a developer can call me and say, hey, where are we? Hey, what are we doing? What does it look like? And just having those resources so everybody knows where the project is and what they can do or we can do on our side to continue moving that process forward.
Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noah, quick couple of questions. One that you had mentioned earlier that when you surveyed your membership that are local issuing authorities, that most of or a percentage of them, I don't remember the exact percentage, either would comply with this as far as their standard operating procedure for turnaround of permits and that sort of thing. And then we talk about the complexity of permits. Does that statement or that response apply only to residential, or is that just across the board for those?
So that's a good question, Chairman. I did not make the distinction when I asked them because the distinction was not made in this legislation. When I asked the local issuing authority professionals across the state of Georgia, my key questions about land disturbance permits, it was just a question about the permits themselves. There was nothing specific to residential development. Again, many of them did say that they strive to meet or beat the deadlines set forth in this bill. And many of them are actually bound by local ordinance to do so, to have a quicker turnaround time. But again, it was cited that an LDP pulled for 2 acres for 4 units or a 5-unit development is a lot easier to turn around than a 120-unit subdivision that's going to require approval from soil and water. You need to have EPD come in because it's a 50-acre plot. There needs to be a notice of intent issued. Maybe you need to work with the Army Corps, other groups. The complexity of this can range from a very simple development to a generational change for a community.
I understand.
They're all
And a lot of those processes will actually take place prior to the submittal. Is that correct? You know, when you're talking about dealing with Army Corps of Engineers, things like that, that's not necessarily part of the land disturbance permit process, is it?
So I can speak to that. A lot of times they're still working through some of those outside approvals, which holds up our final approval. So we are a local issuing authority and we do have our NOA. So we do the Georgia Soil and Water Review in-house. We also do the erosion control in-house. We have a stormwater engineer that oversees all of that. But in kind of going, the complexity of the project does play a big key role. Obviously, you've got a lot more going on from a commercial project to a residential project, from a small residential to a large residential. But a lot of those kind of things are still in the process of getting completed when it comes to us for review. So we may issue, the last comment we may get to is we still need environmental health approval, or we still need, the GDOT needs to weigh in on it because it's their road, their entrance. You can't put your entrance in. We're not approving that. So we will do conditional approvals with still some of those things being in the works. The major concerns that we have, though, is when you have to get state's waters determinations, that can completely change your whole project. Where you thought your road was going to go is now determined a stream, and you've got to do a stream crossing for it, which is engineering, which is additional money going to the builders, because now you've got to either flip your design or you've got to figure out how to cross a stream. So a lot of that is worked through during that process of plan review, because they want to get something started. And we have no problem with doing that. We have no problem with reviewing while they're still working on some of these things and working through some of these issues and then running into topography problems. We have no issue with helping through that process. Our concern is not being able to do it within that time frame allowed by the bill.
Okay, couple of points. Some of the comments made it sound like the 45-day shot clock is a novel idea or something that's being proposed. That is actually in code now. The only thing that this bill is doing is addressing subsequent approvals following that. Also, is it not true that the delay in a resubmittal is not affected by the timing in this? It's the review of that resubmittal. If it takes the developer, the engineer, the architect, whatever, 3 months to submit their resubmittal, then that falls in between the 45-day and the 14-day provision in here. And then also further, the 14 days is for approval or denial. So there is still the option, if the plans are incomplete or if the plans cause a change in scope of the project to a point that it can't be reviewed in 14 days, then the issuing authority still has the option for denial. The one thing that we haven't addressed in this bill that I see, Chairman Chokas, that we may want to look at is what happens in that scenario. What happens if you get to that point? So I don't think we're talking about two totally different things. As far as the qualifications for the preparers, this bill doesn't change that. This bill doesn't put any more impetus or any more responsibility on the issuing authority than they already have, other than it kind of streamlines the time frame. And I'm speaking like I'm defending the bill. I'm just stating some facts contrary to what we kind of had some discussion here. So
With that being said, if you don't mind,
Yes.
the 14 days, calendar days, business days, that's obviously a big difference. But in looking at that, what we at our county, and I know every jurisdiction is different, but what we at our county really try to do is, if we're that close, we're going to work with the design professional to get it done. What we run into, though, is the design professional has to ask their client, which takes a little bit more time in getting back to that. Maybe they're on vacation, maybe whatever the situation, they've got an EIT on it or something like that. So we just want to make sure that we still have that leeway to work through these problems, because when it's 14 days and we need to get a denial or approval, we're going to deny it, which is then, as the gentleman stated earlier, we do look at every resubmittal every single time. And the reason why we do that is to make sure that something that stormwater asked to fix doesn't change what transportation has approved up front, or it doesn't negotiate something else, like doesn't change setbacks on the planning side of things. So that's why each discipline will review those resubmittals. But typically that resubmittal process is going to go faster anyway, because we've done a lot of the legwork up front. We're very familiar with the project. Our stormwater's already looked at the downstream stuff. So we're a lot more vetted on that project by looking at it for the first time, and then when it comes in for the second time. But I just would worry that having a hard number like that would really, we're going to have to deny something that we're trying to get to the finish line because we've hit a number.
said that.
And from the way you talk about it and the passion that you have with your job, I can understand that you and your department are probably involved through this resubmittal process before the actual resubmittal is submitted. So a lot of those issues I would expect to be worked out. It doesn't happen in every case. And we
Right.
can't necessarily legislate that to happen in every case,
Mhm.
but we can encourage that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no more questions, you all are off the hot seat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Chokus, if you and Austin want to come back and kind of wrap this up, this is your opportunity. Yeah, we actually have one more presentation after this, and then we'll do and I think we're probably going to have time for a little bit of public input as well. Just heads up.
Do you want to sit here?
I want you to sit in that chair, not that one.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
All right, table mic's hot. By all means.
Oh, a couple of things that we wanted to address, and then I'm going to turn it over to Austin to finish this. But, when the plans are submitted, we're talking about professional engineers. We're not talking about people that are not trained and qualified in their particular profession. So, I'm a little bit concerned that it implies that the developers are using substandard or uneducated or undisciplined people in drawing up these plans, because they look at all those aspects. And then the second thing, and I think I'm going to let Austin answer that, is when the shop clock starts. So if you would, thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer some of those questions or attempt to, I think speaking on behalf of at least most of the supporters of this effort, I would say there is existing language in the code today for building permits that defines what a complete application is for a building permit. I think copy pasting that language from that code section would make sense in this arena too, so that, from the applicant side, if we know what a complete application is and we know that that starts the shot clock, I think it'd be incumbent on the applicant to ensure that that application is complete and expect that the shot clock would be adhered to. And if we don't submit a complete application, then it's on us to make those complaints. So I think the distinction for the size and complexity of the project is a great piece of feedback from this committee. And I would say, again, there's existing language in the DRI rules about different size and complexity projects. And I think potentially some of that language could be applicable in this scenario too, to make those distinctions. And, as we've said all afternoon, this is a small bite at the apple, and this is an efficient government process that we're trying to make sure is fair and transparent. And so bringing some of these timelines into a more streamlined area, bringing some of these local amendments to the mandatory building codes into the public arena, we think will help these builders and developers in the room bring more homes into the marketplace faster.
Okay. With that, I'm going to open up one last time for any final questions, comments. Anyone? I don't have any flashing lights. I was waiting.
Appreciate
Chairman Montaham.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you for indulging me. I just wanted to say, and Chairman Chokus, you're a friend, and we've dealt with that issue. I've personally dealt with a developer slash he's also an engineer in Paulding who's given our county all sorts of issues and effectively using our county as some sort of engineering firm basically on his behalf. And it's become problematic to where folks that are on both sides of this issue are kind of put out with the situation. So I'm not going to name any names, but I just want to let you know I've seen that personally happen. Otherwise, I would draw the same, I think, brow that you have when you heard the comment. But that is how I just wanted to indulge you, let you know I've seen that personally, and hopefully we can get to the bottom of it. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I have one more comment real fast. I tell you, I had a couple questions. I'll wait till the end. Usually this process starts, and I've dealt more in the industrial realm, but we'll issue an issued for permit set of drawings, and those drawings are not complete drawings. We know they're not complete drawings when they get issued to the office to be reviewed for permit. And that's a little bit more of a collaborative process where we take input from the county, and you have to take that, digest it, put it on a set of drawings. Eventually, you move to what they call an issued for construction set of drawings, which is an IFC sealed set of drawings. And knowing that you're going into a process with an incomplete set of drawings, and not knowing how, and because being on the engineering side of it, we're going to do what our scope is, right? So that scope of drawings may be, a pretty detailed set where the construction company has hired us in. They want us to kind of take it to a certain set, and sometimes they're a much lighter set of drawings based off what the scope that we're provided as the engineer is. So I can kind of see where the county's coming in, and or the issuing authorities are coming in saying, hey, just based off of what I get is how long it's going to be. I can't really say that to you. I just really want to make sure that that's something that we're thinking about. Ultimately, though, what I would say is home affordability, I think the middle class, they've built their wealth off of home. That's off of getting in houses. We gotta make this an opportunity. I think that, that you're right. This is a small piece at the apple or small bite at the apple, because we have 40% of the stock of these numbers I'm hearing they're bought up by out-of-state firms. That's money that's competing against these same houses that people that are trying to buy houses. So you could build 10, but 4 of them are immediately taken off the market by out-of-state money. I think that we've got a big issue here, and anything that we can do to try and help make this affordable to get people in it's an important thing. So, it's Representative Sanchez. I'm gonna go ahead and end this. We'll move on. Okay. Moving on. I'm going to turn the mic over to our chairman, Chairman Anderson, for the next introduction.
I'll turn it off. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. We're officially done with 812 for today, so thank y'all very much. And thank you, Chairman Thomas. Thank you, committee, for coming here today, and everybody who's come out to listen. I had the privilege a couple of months ago to have a Zoom meeting with an organization I had heard of but was not familiar with. And when I talked with them and saw some of the results of what they do, I learned that they are working in this arena, not just in Georgia, but in other parts of the country, and asked for them to come and speak to us briefly. If we can keep it to around 15 minutes or so, it'd be great if we could do that. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Gregory Heller with Guidehouse. And Gregory, if you will just kind of introduce yourself, your company, and organization, and proceed.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Chairman Anderson, for inviting me. And thank you, subcommittee members. My name is Greg Heller. I'm a partner at Guidehouse. I lead our national housing practice. I flew in from Philadelphia to be here today. And the first thing I want to say is that it is so important that you all are having this conversation. I spend my days going to states all around the country, north, south, east, west, and people are talking about challenges around permitting, reviews, how to increase housing supply in a way that they haven't in years. And it's so important, and especially when you talk to developers, homeowners, would-be homeowners, there's been a lot of pent-up demand for bringing this issue to the forefront and having a conversation like y'all are having today. So I want to thank you for that. Guidehouse, if you're not familiar, we're a consulting firm that focuses on state and local government. We have about 18,000 people around the world, including over 500 here in Metro Atlanta. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues, Emily and Rahel, who are hiding in the back over here. Many of us come from public sector. I spent 6 years heading up a big city redevelopment agency focusing on housing supply issues. And we do a lot of work with a number of agencies in Georgia, as well as other states around the South. I'm going to bring a little bit of a national perspective. The issues that everybody's talking about in this room today are particular to Georgia, but they're also not. They're the same issues that we're hearing in state after state all over the country. That there are record home prices, housing production is not keeping pace with demand anywhere in the country. There's low vacancy rates, insufficient supply to meet the demand, insufficient housing starts, not enough homes being built by any stretch, and not enough qualified workforce, which is another key issue that didn't come up much today, but that we're hearing around the country, and affordability challenges as a result. I don't want to belabor the issue because you heard from economists and others throwing statistics out, but in Georgia, housing costs grew nearly twice as wages over a 10-year period. And Georgia actually had the 8th largest increase in home prices over the last 5 years of any state in the country. Permitting delays are a key bottleneck. And I spend a lot of time on the road listening to developers and builders, accompanying legislators or members of the executive for conversations like this. And a lot of these issues are similar. One of the things that's important that I've been seeing in a number of states, and including the Georgia Public Policy Foundation put out a report that quantifies the financial impact of permitting delays. So what that report found was that about 23% of the total cost of multifamily housing and about 27% of the price of a new single-family home built in Georgia is attributed to federal, state, and local regulations. And believe it or not, that's even on the low side of this similar type of analysis that I've seen in some other states where it's up at over 30%. So 25 to 30%, no matter what state you go to, is attributable to permits and other regulations. And I give a few examples down below of 2 counties, 2 cities where you can see the same trend. Very, very low supply today compared to where it was in 2013. Again, not to belabor this because you heard the stats, but I think a picture tells 1,000 words. Permits back around 2008 dropped precipitously here in Georgia and everywhere, and have not picked up anywhere close to the rate that it was back in 2004, whereas population has continued to increase. Vacancy rate decline continues and the market is extremely tight. And again, take a look at that map on the right. Those areas that are dark blue or medium blue are the areas with the most limited availability of housing units. And one point I want to hit home is that it's not just in Metro Atlanta. It's all throughout the state in every county where there are similar supply constraints. And then, of course, home prices are rising much, much faster than incomes. Median home prices in Georgia are up over 50% over the last 5 years. And as you can see in that map, Georgia is not the most mismatch between incomes and home prices, but it's way up there. The 8th highest 5-year increase of home prices of any state in the country over the last 5 years. The economist earlier had some good stats on severe housing cost burden for renters, those paying over 50% of their income on housing costs. And he talked about how there's some nuance when you look at homeowners because a lot of folks locked in low interest rates, which is true. But I want to bring up the homeowner number also because it's substantial. 1 in 5 homeowners in Georgia, 20.1%, are cost burdened, spending over 30% of their income on housing costs. Only 1/3 of homes statewide, this is for sale homes, are affordable to median income households today. And that number continues to get more and more constrained. And as the chairman and others mentioned throughout this, the impact is very clear. It means that it's going to be harder and harder for people to be able to afford to buy a home. And without some real deliberate action and thought, that trend is just going to continue. And the American dream of home ownership will drift farther and farther away from everyone. And just to my point before, the issue of housing supply not meeting demand is not just an Atlanta issue, it's all across the state. The brown areas are the areas with the highest supply constraints. So you've got Atlanta, Athens, Augusta, Columbus, Macon, Savannah. So what are the key takeaways? Georgia needs policy solutions. There we go. Georgia needs policy solutions that expand housing production, increase access to home ownership, and incentivize public-private partnerships and innovation. That public-private partnership is really key. We heard earlier about the push and pull between the building industry and the local code enforcement and other officials. I worked in the public sector for 6 years, dealing directly with developers doing that type of work. I understand. Public-private partnerships are really key. Having solutions where the building industry and the officials can work hand in hand, where you can have combined investment strategies and really bring out the innovation of the private sector through public sector policy and incentives are key if we're going to overcome severe housing supply challenges. So here are a few examples of what other states are doing. One thing I do just want to emphasize, we've talked a lot about how this is one policy solution for a specific issue. I think people have acknowledged that. A challenge as significant as our housing supply issues require a multifaceted solution. So I just encourage every state where we work to think about the whole toolkit of things that have to happen. Do you have the data that you need to understand the supply constraints in as close to real time as possible? Are you listening on an ongoing basis to people who are building the homes, to homeowners, renters, landlords, tenants? They certainly were speaking here today, but I've been on a number of road trips around states, listening to builders in different parts of the states having different issues. Leading practices research, looking at what other states are doing. I'm going to give a couple of quick examples right after this slide. Process improvement is really key. Doesn't all have to be legislated. I'm working with some states that are doing it outside of the legislative process where they're saying, we identify that there is a problem with the way that we're doing permit approvals, environmental reviews, and we're going to look internally and do process improvement, identify pain points, and come up with internal solutions to making our processes better. Policies and incentives for innovation. What kind of investment can the public sector make hand in hand with the private sector to unlock innovation and make housing development easier and more streamlined? And then finally, pro-housing advocacy. We talked a little bit about pushback that folks are going to see. Somebody mentioned that if zoning ever comes up, that's going to be a bloodbath or something like that. And that's certainly what we see all over the place. But part of it does have to do with the mindset and the marketing of how this is brought out. And we've certainly seen states and counties that go proactively out into communities and say, we know that you want to protect the character of your communities. We know there's a lot of not in my backyard sentiment, and you're right to want to protect the character of your community, but we also have a housing crisis. So let's figure out how to do this together, create the housing that we need in a way that works for your communities. And so creating that kind of pro-housing mindset and a culture of yes is really critical to public policy success. So what some other states are doing, it's true, having a shot clock on permitting is nothing new, and a lot of states are either introducing it. Some have passed legislation that creates a timeline on permitting. We mentioned Arizona. Two other examples are Florida's HB 267 and Texas's HB 14. Florida's, somebody asked earlier whether there are any examples of places that have different clocks and processes for different complexities of projects. Florida's does exactly that. In Texas's, There's a shot clock, but also if the city misses the deadline, the builder can actually bring in a qualified third-party reviewer. There are a number of places that have economic incentives and tools for investing in infrastructure that makes housing possible. For example, in Ohio, there's a new grant program where developers and municipalities can apply to the state for infrastructure grants around economic growth centers. And in exchange, the locality has to agree to put in place pro-housing policies. Then expanded zoning and land use. I know that's not something that was on the table today, but there was a good amount of conversation around housing for middle-income households, especially folks like firefighters, teachers, nurses. And there are good examples around the country that I'd be happy to share at a later time of places that have done exactly that. For example, in North Carolina, their SB 497 allows local governments to permit middle housing types in residential zones, including single-family areas, and prohibits imposing unreasonable costs or delays to discourage such development. And so I'd be happy to elaborate more on some of those examples of places that have invested in policies for workforce housing and middle housing. So in conclusion, I think that any efforts to bring up the conversation around how to increase housing supply in states around the country is positive. This is a conversation that wasn't happening too long ago and now is happening in states all over the country. But I also think it's important for states to take a multifaceted approach that looks at that data analysis, engaging people who are building the housing, looking at land use and zoning, looking at financial incentives, and looking at that building streamlining, permit streamlining and building code modernization, all as one cohesive package and approach to build as big a tent as possible around making sure that your people have the housing that they need. So those are my remarks today. As I mentioned, I do this work every day in states all around the country. Heading to another state tonight to do something very similar in the morning with their legislators and governor's office. If there's anything that we can do to be of service to the state of Georgia, as I mentioned, we have a big office here, a lot of people, and we love working in Georgia. So happy to answer any questions you have either now or afterwards. My contact information is provided up there, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
No problem. If you have one question, do you mind staying for one question?
Of course.
Okay.
I'll stay here as long as you need me to.
All right. Representative Oliver.
Particularly grateful that you pointed to the Florida and Texas statute. These looks like good examples of possible solutions about what we talked about in terms of big versus little, and also other options for everything.
Sanchez.
Thank you so much for that presentation. And again, we all agree we need to do everything we can around a housing supply. Now, it was mentioned earlier that the last 5 years has really seen a skyrocketing in housing, but we haven't really seen like that drastic of a change in permitting laws in the last 5 years here in Georgia, correct? So while I do agree that there are some things that we could do around that, that's not the root cause of what's causing the skyrocketing housing prices. At least it's not the only one. And so, like you said, is multifaceted issues that we have to look at. And so I know you're talking about supply, but like I mentioned before, what about the demand and the fact that we're seeing these investment firms and major corporations coming in and buying up all this housing as well? Is that not something that we can also do to help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a number of states that are looking at that issue of large corporate and private equity buyers and strategies to address that. And that's of interest. I'd be happy to give some case studies of that as well afterward.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
But you're absolutely right. There are a lot of different causes, which is why the solutions also have to be multifaceted and cohesive.
Right. Appreciate it.
Well, perfect. You have no more questions. Thank you for making the trip here.
Absolutely.
today.
My pleasure.
We appreciate having you.
Yep. I applaud everything that you're doing. Keep pushing on the housing issue. It's really important.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your
I
time.
couldn't agree more. With that said, you only have just enough time for public comment. So congratulations. However, we're going to keep it to 2 minutes. And when I say 2 minutes, I'm going to start going like this when you start getting close to 2 minutes. Okay. So that means wrap it up. All right. Okay. So we're going to start off with Jamie Kavanaugh, Pacific Legal Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, chairs of the committee. My name is Jamie Kavanaugh. I am State Policy Counsel at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Even though Pacific's in our name, we're a national public interest nonprofit. Most of what we do is litigation against the government, but we also have a policy team. And since our founding more than 50 years ago, one of our main focuses has been on protecting private property rights. So I just want to express that, from a property owner standpoint, that this bill is very important as well. We've heard about all the people who are involved in the process, but when we're talking about our core constitutional values, we want to remember that policies like this protect private property rights, the right to build, the right to develop, and importantly, they do so without interfering with local control to make permitting decisions. But we want these decisions to be made promptly and with transparency. And that's all this bill is doing. So as we've heard, we have seen this in a number of states, and it's states that I think Georgia wants to compete with economically, like Texas, like Florida, like Arizona. So I think that is another data point you should keep in mind when you're looking at the states that have made these changes in recent years. They're states that Georgia wants to compete with for workforce. So thank you so much. I don't want to repeat anything that's already been stated today, but thank you for the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you for being here today. Neil Herring, Flint River Keepers. Absolutely, by all means.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Gordon Rogers is the Flint River Keeper. I'm his lobbyist. I'm going to read a statement that he sent me to read to you. It should be 2 minutes. Flint River Keeper is a membership organization dedicated to the restoration and protection of clean flowing water in the Flint from the headwaters in Southwest Metro to the Florida line. This includes all tributary creeks and aquifers in this 8,000 square mile watershed. We are supported by over 3,000 citizen landowners, business owners, farmers, foresters, anglers, hunters, and more. The most prevalent pollutant in the Flint and other Georgia rivers is loose dirt coming from poorly managed, disturbed areas. The most common sources are poorly maintained dirt roads and under-regulated construction sites. We get more pollution complaints and reports emanating from these sources than anything else we deal with. HB 812 does not deal with roads, but addresses directly the construction industry all over Georgia. Our experience with local issuing authorities is that some are very good at protecting local water resources while others are neglectful, yet others are wholly under the influence of local developers. In recent years, it has fallen on property owners downstream of several Southwest Metro construction sites to defend their waters and their property rights with court actions based on federal pollution law and state trespass statutes, being unable to depend on the LIA to protect their interests. Relaxing this regulatory structure is a bad move for private property values and Georgia's waters. Georgia needs more regulation of dirt in our streams, not less. The bill in front of you has merit in certain sections, but moves in a dangerous direction regarding review periods. We support the change at line 32, changing should to shall. This small change will have positive ripple effects throughout the state. We support the additional changes through the end of section 1 at line 71. We do not support
We're wrapping it.
changes. Am I done?
Go ahead. I'll give you about 10 more seconds.
Oh, thank you. We do not support the changes to section 2 regarding the timing of permit issuance in lines 93 through 98. A savvy applicant could easily game the system by putting features into their application on the second submission, the 14-day round, features that are much more complex in terms of analysis by the LIA than would be accommodated by 14 days. Much more appropriate for this section would be a second 30 to 45-day period. Similarly, the addition of section D at lines 99 through 102 subject the referenced 14-day period in section C is a dangerous threat to downstream property owners and public water resources. However, if section C were to be changed to a more productive time period, 30 to 45 days, then section D would be appropriate, indeed welcomed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Why don't you do this? Please just forward that along to the committee, to myself, and
We will send it to you.
yeah, just send it to, and
I'll
we'll
have him
digest
send
it
it
that
to you.
way.
I don't want to send it to you.
That sounds
He's going to
good.
send it to you.
Thank
He'll
you.
probably add more junk to it anyways.
I gave you 50% more
Thank you.
time than I,
Appreciate it.
so you're good. Thank you. Jason Olseth, Chattahoochee Riverkeeper.
Sit here if that's okay.
Absolutely. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jason Alseth. I'm the Executive Director and Riverkeeper for Chattahoochee Riverkeeper, which is how I pay my bills. But I'm here mostly to testify on behalf of my elected position, which I am in Fulton County, an elected Soil and Water Conservation District Supervisor. These are on the general ballot, and we have a large role that plays in this plan review process. So if you have a local government, they can either be a local issuing authority or not. If they're a local issuing authority, then they have to go through us to get their plans approved. We can delegate our authority down to the local issuing authorities, but ultimately it comes to the soil and water conservation districts, which are elected and unpaid, to review and approve these plans. In 14 days, I mean, that's crazy low. So lots of circumstances where it can be met, but it's going to cause a lot of confusion, a lot of heartache, especially if this is going to apply to a 300-acre data center. I'm all for expediting this housing, but to apply it to every project in Georgia is pretty tough to do, I think. And I'll say this, I have reviewed thousands of plans. I'm a certified plan designer. I'm a certified plan reviewer. And out of all the plans that I see, the ones that slow down are the ones who don't do it right. It's the incomplete plans that get submitted and then having to go through this long process instead of doing it right the first time and getting an expedited plan review. Folks that come in, have their game on, they get through. The folks that come in and want the plan reviewer to design it for them, and so that they can just do the bare minimum things that plan reviewer is going to ask for, that's where the delays from my perspective as an elected official in Fulton County, that's where the delays happen.
No, thank you very much. And I think that there's a couple people in the room that you should try and get in touch with before you take off. ACCG, GMA, Austin, if you could. Thank you. All right, we have one more on public comment. George Kelachek. Did I say that right? All right. And Rockdale County Soil Water Conservation District.
Yes, sir, that's correct. Here with a couple of my colleagues, Ellis LeMay from Gwinnett County and Jason, who you just heard from Fulton County. So over 300 supervisors here in the state of Georgia under the jurisdiction of the Georgia Soil Water Conservation Commission. And then we are under the jurisdiction then of the Department of Agriculture. Just several items. You have a package that I've submitted to you all. This is the research that we've done regarding this bill. You can look at it. One of the things I would like to point out to you is based on current LIA MOA listings, fewer than 1/4 of the certified LIA reviews their own ENS plans under a plan review. The large majority rely on soil and water conservation districts, which there's 5 regional offices here in the state. Our question would be, and we have questions in this submittal to you, is we need to look at how are we going to then employ additional employees to look at these plans and make sure they're correct, because we don't want to destroy our neighbors moving south all the time. So we're going to have to look at, if this becomes true, we're going to have to look at additional employees, and we're going to have to figure out how to fund them. Also, there is some clarity I believe that this group needs to look at, and we're more than happy to meet with you from the Georgia Soil Water Conservation Districts. There's 40 of them around the state. We're here to educate. So one of the things we're doing in Rockdale County is we're going to have, with the Georgia Soil Water Conservation Commission, we're going to have LIA engineering training. So these individuals know what to expect prior to submitting these pieces of information. Because many times it's incomplete, but if we provide the right type of training, we should be a lot better off. So just to let you know, here's a 40-page plan with, that's just one subdivision. 700 plans last month. Let's throw in a hydrology study of 100 pages. Tough to do it in 14 days. So I believe you need to slow down the process a little bit and let us meet with the experts that we are to provide you some additional information regarding this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. That concludes our list. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, did you have any final comments? That being no, we will consider this meeting closed. Thank you.
Cool job.
Best I could.